Chapter 91, First Encounter with Apocalypse. Because the pyramid was destroyed, the special pyramid energy that was absorbing sunlight and converting it rapidly declined. The energy surrounding the two gradually weakened and dissipated. The transfer ritual between them was forced to be interrupted. Apocalypse woke up from the transfer. After seeing the hole cut in the top of the pyramid, he realized that his transfer ritual had been destroyed. Wow! A cloud of smoke suddenly appeared, and a blue-skinned young man with a tail leaned over and hugged Charles, who had lost all his hair, and disappeared from Apocalypse's side. Apocalypse was already very angry about the transfer ceremony being interrupted, and now the target he wanted to transfer was rescued by someone, which made him furious. Charles! As he roared, the huge stone pillars he had shaped inside the pyramid began to collapse, and suddenly a sword light fell from the sky. Swish! Several blue sword auras shot out from the sword light, and even the hard stone pillars in the pyramid could not block them at all. He only saw the sword energy easily cut off the stone pillar and continued to attack him. Faced with such a powerful attack, Apocalypse had to defend himself. He just raised his hand and a large number of stone pillars rose from the ground and rushed towards the sword energy. He himself released a spherical shield that covered his entire body to guard against sword attacks. The stone pillars he released gradually dissipated the sword energy, and when it finally landed on his shield, the power of the sword energy was reduced to only 1/10 of what it was, and was easily blocked by the shield. However, behind these sword energies was Mu-En. He passed through the severed stone pillars with the attack of the sword energy and landed in front of Apocalypse. Oh, it seems Charles has been rescued. Seeing that Apocalypse was the only one left here, combined with the roar just now, he had guessed the whole story. When Apocalypse saw Mu-En's transformation into Excalibur Holy Sword, alarm bells went off in his heart. The warrior in front of him with a rhino horn on his head was very dangerous. Especially the energy sword, which gave him a very bad feeling, as if he would be killed directly if he touched it. You should know that the last time he performed the transfer ritual, he specially selected a mutant with super self-healing abilities as the carrier. With super self-healing abilities, he can ignore a lot of fatal injuries. But now, he felt the long-lost breath of death from Mu-En, as if he would be killed instantly if touched by the energy sword. This was not what he wanted. He wanted to restore the glory of mutants, not die here. Knowing that he might die facing Mu-En's attack, he did not hesitate too much. While Mu-En was swinging his glorious sword, he used his mutant ability to collapse the pyramid, trying to trap Mu-En here. Before the sword energy struck, he teleported outside the pyramid, wanting to find Charles to complete the final transfer ceremony. The scattered stone pillars and the ever-deepening quicksand did cause Mu-En some trouble. But what surprised him even more was Apocalypse's decisiveness. This mutant ancestor did not get too entangled with him. After collapsing the pyramid, he teleported away directly. Mu-En waved his hand and released countless sword energies, then laughed. It was the first time he encountered such an opponent. As expected of the ancestor of mutants, he is decisive enough in his actions. However, this collapsed pyramid cannot trap him. There was a flash of light on his body, and he instantly turned into Titania Phantom Butterfly Fairy, activated the razor wings, turned into a butterfly-sized form, and rushed out of the collapsed pyramid. Outside the pyramid, Logan and his team were confronting Apocalypse and others, but now Apocalypse and his team were clearly at a disadvantage. The brothers Alex and Scott released red energy beams, and this powerful attack forced Apocalypse to defend against the brothers' red beams. Eric and Aurora also joined Logan and the others to fight against Apocalypse to protect Charles. Under Eric's control, countless metals blasted towards Apocalypse. Aurora was not to be outdone. She raised her hand and released countless lightning bolts, striking towards Apocalypse. The changes in both of them are understandable. After all, Eric went crazy because he lost his family, so he chose to join Apocalypse to destroy humanity. Now that he knows his family is still there, he naturally won't go with Apocalypse. The reason why Aurora changed her camp was even simpler. She met the mutant hero Raven. Compared to Apocalypse who ignored life, Raven was the light in the hearts of many mutants. However, neither of them attacked the Angel with iron wings or Psylocke who used energy weapons. They just wanted to stop Apocalypse and had no intention of becoming enemies with the Angels and Psylocke. But that didn't mean that Angel and Psylocke were left alone, as Hank and Logan charged towards the two, each of them choosing their own opponent. Hank was entangled with the Angel, but his strength was much greater than that of the Angel, forcing the Angel to fly into the air and shoot metal arrows at Hank. Fortunately, the blue demon Kurt used teleportation in time and took Hank, who also had blue skin, to avoid the metal arrow feathers and kill the angel. On the other side, Logan waved his claws and rushed forward to meet Psylocke's attack. The adamantium on his body was very hard, and he could easily block Psylocke's energy weapon. But Psylocke had a very uncomfortable fight. Facing an opponent whose whole body was made of super strong alloy and had super self-healing abilities, many of her attacks were ineffective. The opponent can ignore her attacks and continue to counterattack her, but she cannot ignore the steel claws. Once hit by them, she will be seriously injured at best, and die at worst. They were fighting fiercely here, while on the other side, Charles was curled up on the ground in pain, and Jean didn't know how to relieve his pain. Professor. Jean hugged Charles's body, trying to use her abilities to soothe his pain. It looks like he has a mental problem. After recovering his form beside the two, Muen raised his hand and pressed it on Charles's bald head. Don't let anyone else get close to here. After saying that, Muen turned directly into energy and entered Charles's spiritual world. Charles's spiritual world is a house, which is his home and Xavier School for gifted people. At this moment, he was fighting with Apocalypse's spirit in this house. It might be because he had been in a wheelchair for many years, or maybe Apocalypse's ability was even stronger. Their fight was one-sided, with Charles being pinned to the ground and beaten like a rag doll by the giant-like Apocalypse. Snort! A beam of light suddenly shot out and instantly hit Apocalypse, who was beating Charles. This blow caused Apocalypse's body to shrink continuously as if it was leaking air, and in the blink of an eye it returned to the size of a normal person. Tisk, 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 you got really beaten up, Charles. Hearing the sound, Charles weakly climbed up from the ground and looked over. Apocalypse had been kicked to the ground, with a foot stepping on his face. Looking up, he saw a familiar figure. Seeing Charles looking over, Muen greeted him with a smile. Hello, long time no see, is this your new hairstyle? Chapter 92, Degeneration in Apocalypse. When Charles saw it was Muen, he was stunned for a moment, then he breathed a sigh of relief. He was not surprised that Moon was still alive. 10 years ago, when Logan found them to stop Raven's actions, he had already received news about Moon from his future self. Haha, you're back after all. Charles lay on the ground and let out a long breath. Of course I have to come back. I haven't received my salary yet. Muen responded with a big laugh, and he stepped down hard with energy surging under his feet. Apocalypse's spirit body was directly crushed and turned into countless spirit fragments that dissipated in Charles's spiritual space. Now Charles was completely disconnected from Apocalypse, and he no longer felt any pain. He lay in Xavier College in the spiritual world with a comfortable look on his face. But in reality, Apocalypse, who was defending against everyone's attacks, suddenly became dazed. His spiritual body in Charles's spiritual world was blown up by a stranger. That person possessed a very strange power that made him unable to use any abilities in the spiritual world. It was at this moment of trance that Eric and the others found the flaw in Apocalypse's defense and launched their attacks towards that flaw with all their might. 2 steel bars pierced through Apocalypse's body, followed by red energy beams and roaring lightning. Apocalypse's body was damaged by various attacks. If he did not have super self-healing abilities, he would have died under the attacks of everyone. However, even if he possesses super self-healing abilities, it does not mean that he can survive from the hands of everyone. His spirit has been severely damaged, and now it is impossible for him to withstand the attacks released by everyone. A steel bar shot out surrounded by lightning and instantly pierced through Apocalypse's head, nailing him in the ruins. Seeing this fatal blow, everyone stopped. No one could survive such a deadly attack. Just when everyone relaxed, a dazzling ball of light suddenly appeared above Apocalypse's head, and the light released by that ball of light enveloped Apocalypse. Apocalypse, who was originally blue-gray in color, gradually turned golden in the light. The steel bars inserted into his body turned into powder and reshaped into a scepter in his hand. His wounds were healing rapidly, returning to normal in the blink of an eye. Even his damaged armor was reshaped. Why is there a void fluctuation? Muen, who was reminiscing with Charles in the spiritual world, suddenly frowned. He suddenly felt a fluctuation coming from the void. But apart from himself, is there anyone else who controls the power of the void and can cause void fluctuations? Moon, who noticed something was wrong, stopped chatting with Charles and decided to go out and see what was going on. Charles's body emanated energy, and the next moment Muen reassembled his body in the energy. Jean was guarding Charles at this time, but she looked a little dazed, as if she was thinking about something. Even when Mu-En appeared beside her, she didn't react at all. Mu-En didn't care. He looked in the direction of the void fluctuations and saw the guy bathed in void energy. Apocalypse? Isn't he blue-gray? And why does that ball of light on his head look so familiar? Looking at the apocalypse that had turned golden, countless questions arose in Mu-En's mind. After observing for a while, he finally remembered that the ball of light emitting void fluctuations was the void crack that appeared when he opened a walnut in the game. The power released by the void rift will corrupt life, and the combat capabilities of the corrupted will be enhanced accordingly. This is the situation with Apocalypse now. His whole body is bathed in the energy of the void crack. His golden appearance represents that he has completed his corruption and his power has been strengthened. Strange, I don't have any walnuts in my hand, so how could it cause a void crack? Mu-En was a little confused. From the time he completed the reversal of the future to the time and space reversal, some things that happened were beyond his expectations. If he possessed the void relic, the so-called walnut, he would not be surprised if void cracks appeared around him. After all, to open the void relic, one needs to use the void light body that emerges from the void cracks. But now he doesn't even have the shell of the void relic in his hand, so how could void cracks appear around him? This made Mu-En very confused. He was really curious about what was on Tiankai's body that caused the void crack to appear. Everyone keep attacking! Eric shouted loudly, controlling countless metals in the air to kill Apocalypse. He had a bad feeling that once Apocalypse woke up, he would become even more powerful. At his shout, everyone else released their abilities as well. Red energy beams and thunder continued to fall from the sky. Various attacks blasted towards Apocalypse, but their attacks couldn't even touch Apocalypse's armor. At this time, Apocalypse was wrapped in an invisible spherical protective shield. Their attacks fell on the protective shield, and except for stirring up waves of fire, they could not cause any harm to Apocalypse. As the void cracks gradually disappeared, Apocalypse slowly fell from the air. At this time, he was dressed as a noble pharaoh and looked extremely majestic. The moment his feet touched the ground, Apocalypse opened his eyes, with golden light emanating from them. The surrounding ruins turned into yellow sand in an instant and gathered around him. Is this guy too enhanced? Although we know that Apocalypse's mutant ability is very powerful, he still needed to use his hands when using his ability before. But now, just by opening his eyes, the surrounding ruins turned into countless yellow sands. With a light tap of his feet, Mu-En instantly disappeared from his original position and rushed towards Apocalypse. He had to figure out why the void crack appeared. The fallen Apocalypse lightly tapped the yellow sand with the golden scepter in his hand. Countless yellow sands gathered under his feet, and the surrounding metals also collapsed and gathered towards him. Soon, a metal pyramid that looked like it was made of gold was reshaped behind him, and then countless yellow sands condensed and rose from the ground. In an instant, a pyramid even larger than the previous one appeared in front of everyone, and what attracted more attention was the golden spire on the top of the pyramid. There are countless strange patterns engraved on the top of the tower, which emit a mysterious glow under the sunlight. But Apocalypse did not act casually. He stood on the stone platform in front of the pyramid and slowly raised the scepter in his hand. Laugh! A beam of light shot from the scepter to the top of the tower. The moment the beam landed on the top of the tower, the mysterious light on the top of the tower quickly transformed into blue energy, spreading rapidly on the strange patterns of the pyramid. Whatever you want to do, stop it now. As the sound came, a figure in shattered armor appeared in the air, and a heart-wrenching wail erupted from it. Lost skill, gaze countless tendrils wrapped around Apocalypse's body, making him like a sculpture, unable to move. But before Mu-En could relax, he saw the tendrils on Apocalypse's body quickly melting away, allowing him to recover from being frozen. Chapter 94, Soldiers of Sand and Gravel. Something feels wrong. This situation is extremely strange. According to common sense, the gazing tendrils should freeze Apocalypse. But now, Apocalypse only paused for a moment and then all the tendrils wrapped around him dissolved, which made Mu-En feel incredible. In the past, Zaku's lost skills Echoes of the Void were very useful, whether it was attack or control, it could be said to be very powerful. But now, facing the corrupted Apocalypse, the gaze, one of the 3 lost skills, not only failed to completely freeze the opponent, but was directly broken free by the opponent. A mutant can break free from the tendrils of the void. Looking at Apocalypse who was now able to move freely, Mu-En immediately used another lost technique. Lost skills, accusations a void crack was opened, and the void energy that drifted out from it spread towards Apocalypse. But this time Apocalypse remained unshakable. When the power of accusation enveloped him, Mu-En saw golden energy echoing on Apocalypse's body, offsetting the void energy released by accusation. I see. No wonder I was able to break free from the gaze of the void tendrils. It turns out that I used the energy of the void crack to offset the gaze and accusation. Mu-En finally understood the real reason why Tiankai was able to break free from his gaze. Apocalypse, who has completely fallen, cannot use the power of the void, but his whole body is infected by the void energy. The remaining void power can not only strengthen Apocalypse's power, but also help him defend against the influence of the void energy. But this is not a problem for Mu-En. Since the control ability is ineffective against Apocalypse, he will use his attack ability to solve the problem. At least he has to dissipate the void energy in Apocalypse first. He pulled out the energy blade, and the void energy in his hand surged wildly. The blade of the energy blade continued to brighten, tearing through the air with a sharp hissing sound. Swish! Secret words of truth. When the energy blade slashed towards Apocalypse, Mu-En injected void energy into the energy blade, which once again increased the destructive power of the energy blade to a new level. Dang! Apocalypse raised the scepter in his hand and blocked Mu-En's energy blade. This golden scepter also had void energy flowing on it. With the help of the power of void energy, Apocalypse easily blocked Mu-En's attack. But such an attack was just an appetizer. As Mu-En swung his knife, his fingertips lit up instantly. Lost skill, denial. Void energy surged out from his fingertips like a torrent, transforming into a beam of void light that shot towards Apocalypse. Even if Apocalypse's reaction was fast, he would not be able to block such a close-range attack. And this is indeed the case. Facing Mu-En's void beam, Apocalypse did not choose to resist at all, but flashed directly to other locations. Snort! The void beam shot straight towards the pyramid, leaving a hole in one of the pyramid's exquisite stone pillars. Seeing that the attack missed, Mu-En stepped hard on the ground and rushed towards Apocalypse. The energy blade in his hand flashed, and a sword energy shot out as Mu-En swung it. Ding! Facing the oncoming sword energy, Tiankai tapped the ground lightly with his scepter, and stone pillars surged up like waves, rushing towards the sword energy and Mu-En. Although the energy blade's sword energy has considerable destructive power, it is, after all, an imitation of a glorious sword, and its destructive power cannot be compared with that of a glorious sword. Facing the stone pillars that were like waves, the sword energy only cut through a few of them before it was completely consumed. This forced Mu-En to stomp hard in the air. Energy suddenly appeared under his feet, allowing him to jump up into the air and avoid the wave-like attack of the stone pillars. Seeing Mu-En jump into the air, Tiankai raised the scepter in his hand, and the surrounding environment began to change rapidly. The range of the yellow sand became larger, and even the place where Eric and the others were was covered by the yellow sand. Everyone gathered together, so as not to be swallowed by the yellow sand. Charles's voice rang in everyone's mind. Charles, who had just woken up, naturally saw this horrific scene. He was the first to react and notified everyone to gather together. Just as they gathered together, a strange sound was heard from the yellow sand. Boom, boom, boom. Countless soldiers holding spears appeared out of nowhere. They walked in unison, making a dull sound every time they landed. Oh my god! Blue Devil Kurt was shocked by the scene before him. A huge army appeared in front of them. Although their weapons seemed to be backward, it was undeniable that the number of this army was really huge. Boom! Swish! The soldiers moved in unison, throwing the spears in their hands, and their target was Mu-En, who was fighting with Apocalypse. Countless spears fell from the sky, completely covering Mu-En like a torrential rain. Just when the dense spears were about to hit Mu-En, fragments of Mu-En's body exploded and void energy spread outward wildly. Ultra-dimensional purgatory launched the spears that were intended to put an end to Mu-En were instantly destroyed in the explosion of the super-dimensional purgatory, and a skeleton emitting light all over its body appeared. At this time, Apocalypse was no longer entangled with Mu-En. He flew directly into the air and waved the scepter gently. The yellow sand in the soldier's hand surged, and quickly condensed into a new spear, which was shot towards Mu-En again. Swish! The spears were thrown into the air, forming a dark mass like a dark cloud. Deal with these soldiers. Under Charles's command, many mutants rushed towards the soldiers. Alex released red beams from his fists and chest, attacking the soldiers. Scott, who could also release beams, took off his glasses without hesitation. Red beams were released from his eyes, and as they moved, they wiped out a large number of soldiers. Eric, on the other hand, controlled a large amount of metal, which spun at high speed in the huge army, breaking the bodies of the soldiers one by one. As for Aurora, she did not attack the soldiers directly. The storm around her continued to grow stronger, and under her control, she rushed towards the spears thrown by the soldiers at a high speed. The huge storm rolled up the billowing dust and swept away all the thrown spears before rushing towards the huge army. In their attacks, large swathes of the army were quickly destroyed. However, this did not change Tian Kai's expression at all. He just raised his hand and waved it again. Countless yellow sands began to flow, and in a blink of an eye they gathered into a new army of sand and gravel. These soldiers are all made of sand. No matter how many are destroyed, they will be quickly reborn under his power. Seeing the fallen soldiers rebuilding their bodies in the yellow sand, Charles and the others immediately realized that it was impossible to completely eliminate these soldiers unless they could kill Apocalypse. However, Apocalypse's power was far greater than before. Their attacks couldn't even break the protective shield around Apocalypse, let alone kill Apocalypse. Now they can only place their hopes on Mu-En, hoping that Mu-En can kill Apocalypse, and they have to help Mu-En delay the endless army of sand soldiers to buy time for him. Chapter 95. Yellow Sand All Over the Sky. After his corruption, Apocalypse gained even more powerful strength, and after being infected by the void energy, the suppressing effect of the void power on mutant abilities was greatly weakened. Although Zaku's resonance of the void's attack effect is still effective, it can no longer suppress Apocalypse and seal his ability. After several attempts, Mu-En roughly understood what kind of power the corrupted Apocalypse possessed. Now Apocalypse's ability has been greatly improved, and the suppressing effect of the power of the void is almost useless to him. The only good news is that Apocalypse cannot use the power of the void. He cannot even drive the void energy in his body. He can only passively accept the powerful force brought by his corruption. The angel flying in the air pointed the scepter in his hand into the air, and a huge sphinx quickly condensed in the surging yellow sand below. In a blink of an eye, a giant gravel monster called the Sphinx, whose body was made of hard rock, stood up in the yellow sand, raised its head and let out a roar. Roar as it roared, the rolling sand and dust around it was directly shaken away. The Sphinx spread its wings behind it and flapped them violently, and the giant sand beast rushed towards Moon at a high speed. Lost skill, denial. A void beam shot out from Moon's hand and swept towards the Sphinx. The void beam released by Moon had extremely strong destructive power. Even though the Sphinx's body was covered with hard rocks, it was quickly destroyed by the attack of the void beam. But no matter how fast Mu-En destroyed, the Sphinx's body would be repaired quickly. Countless yellow sands flowed on its body like water. The damaged places were filled with yellow sand in an instant and turned into hard stones again. Tisk, it's really hard enough. The destructive power of the void beam is very powerful within a certain range, but it seems somewhat powerless when facing a self-repairing sand monster like the Sphinx. After all, the Sphinx is controlled by Apocalypse, and if you want to defeat it, you must get rid of Apocalypse. The Sphinx, whose entire body was made of rock, leaped high and pounced towards Mu-En. Seeing the giant sand beast falling from the sky, Mu-En tapped his feet lightly and quickly retreated backwards. Thump! The giant gravel beast smashed into the ground so hard that cracks appeared on the rocks all over its body, but this did not affect its movements. After it stood up, the cracks on its body began to recover rapidly, and it continued to flap its wings and rushed towards Mu-En. This time it used more attack methods, raising its claws and swung them out fiercely, with several sharp slashes coming towards Mu-En. Swish! Facing the incoming slash, Mu-En immediately counterattacked, swinging the energy blade to meet the slash and releasing several sword energies. After a void beam was released, the Sphinx's slash was easily broken, and the void beam shot straight towards the Sphinx. The void beam instantly fell on the giant beast, destroying the stone scales on its body. But the Sphinx is not a living being after all, and the scales on its body are just for decoration. Even if they are destroyed, it will not be affected. I saw yellow sand surging in the Sphinx's mouth, and with a deafening roar, the yellow sand in its mouth turned into a quicksand cannon and bombarded Mu-En. Boom! The quicksand cannon exploded the moment it landed on the ground, and thick sand and dust obscured Mu-En's figure. Just as the Sphinx was preparing to act, a huge eye beam pierced its body, followed by a red energy beam and a huge storm. The attacks of Eric's and Scott were the most effective. Their attacks were extremely hot and powerful, destroying the Sphinx's body and melting it into lava. The subsequent storm enveloped the Sphinx, trapping the sand beast in the storm, and with the cooperation of everyone, it continued to wear down its body. Seeing that the Sphinx was besieged by everyone, Apocalypse gave up control of the Sphinx and allowed everyone to destroy the Sphinx, which had turned into a sphinx. Now he had more important things to do. He pointed his scepter at the pyramid, and the green energy that had already spread throughout the pyramid instantly dissipated and gathered towards him. The previous attacks were just to divert the target. His real goal was the energy converted from the top of the pyramid. In addition to helping him complete the transfer ceremony, this energy had many more uses. As the green energy continued to pour in, Apocalypse flew in the air and pointed his scepter into the air. The yellow sand on the ground condensed, and soon a large number of huge human-shaped stone statues appeared. The stone statues' eyes emitted green energy, which then turned into green rays and shot towards Mu-En. In Apocalypse's perception, Moon, who appeared in skeleton form, posed the greatest threat to him. Other mutants could not even break his shield, but Moon ignored his shield and attacked him directly. But now, Mu-En, who was in a skeleton state, had to avoid the blue rays released by those humanoid stone statues. These blue rays have extremely strong destructive power, even comparable to Alex's energy impact. After landing, they melt all the rocks on the ground into boiling lava in the blink of an eye. Faced with such an attack, Mu-En could only try his best to dodge and continuously release sword energy and void beams to counterattack. Fortunately, these stone statues do not have any corrupted characteristics. They are just ordinary stone statues that can emit high-temperature rays and are unable to withstand Mu-En's attacks. Under his continuous counterattack, the stone statues were quickly destroyed, but a more serious problem also followed. Every time the stone statue is destroyed, it will turn into a bomb and blow up everything around it at the moment of destruction. Explosions continued to occur around him, and the powerful blasts carried countless pieces of debris and splashed everywhere, forcing Mu-En to release the grip of the void. As the void tendrils extended out, a large number of void balls condensed around Mu-En, continuously emitting void rays at the stone statues and flying debris. With the void rays shot out by the void ball, Mu-En's combat efficiency was greatly improved. He no longer had to guard against the flying debris caused by the explosion. Instead, he used void beams and sword energy attacks to quickly destroy those humanoid stone statues that could shoot blue rays. Seeing that the stone statue he created was being destroyed rapidly, Apocalypse glanced at the pyramid behind him, then waved gently at the pyramid. Boom boom boom. The pyramid began to shake continuously, but no changes occurred. This made everyone, including Mu-En, alert. Apocalypse's successive actions have summoned many powerful things, and there is no way there will be no changes this time. Whether it was the endless army of sand soldiers, the indestructible sand monster Sphinx, or the humanoid stone statues with powerful destructive rays now. They all possessed extraordinary strength, especially the Sphinx and these human-shaped statues, which hindered Mu-En's movements and prevented him from attacking Tiankai. The shaking of the pyramid this time must be Apocalypse summoning something more powerful. However, in the intervals between attacking the stone statue, Mu-En discovered some subtle changes in Apocalypse. The golden void energy on Apocalypse seemed to have faded a little. Chapter 96, The Rebirth of the Four Ancient Horsemen. Inside the pyramid, 4 huge sarcophagi are placed horizontally in front of the statue of Apocalypse. Countless yellow sands rushed towards the 4 sarcophagi and wrapped them up. The golden liquid on the ground, surrounded by green energy, gradually spread over the sarcophagus, dyeing all the lines on the sarcophagus golden. As time went by, green energy lingered on the golden lines and continuously flowed into these sarcophagi. Boom, 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 a sarcophagus began to shake continuously, and a dull sound erupted from it, as if something in the sarcophagus wanted to break out. The sarcophagus shook more and more violently, and disappeared from the pyramid under the cover of yellow sand. Outside the pyramid, Mu-En, who had just destroyed all the stone statues, stepped on the stone pillars of the pyramid and rushed towards Apocalypse floating in the air. Boom, along with a dull sound, a black coffin covered with yellow sand appeared on the stone platform outside the pyramid, and the sound came from the coffin. Boom, the yellow sand wrapped around the stone coffin was directly shaken away, and countless cracks appeared on the coffin. Boom, with a loud bang, the stone coffin shattered, and a sturdy man dressed in black, looking like a ferocious beast, appeared on the platform. Roar! The sturdy man slammed his fists together, causing countless cracks to appear on the hard stone pillars around him. He let out a deafening roar, and the high-pitched roar dispersed all the dust raised around him. Black Knight greets the master. The Black Knight placed one hand on his chest and knelt on one knee facing Apocalypse, who was floating in the air. After seeing the skeleton rushing towards Apocalypse, the Black Knight, like an angry bull, exerted force with his legs, shot towards Mu-En like a cannonball, and punched Mu-En. Faced with the attack of this beast-like Black Warrior, Mu-En had to give up attacking Apocalypse and instead swung his sword at the Black Knight. Dang! The energy blade collided with the Black Knight's fist. The Black Knight's hard gauntlet was surrounded by a faint golden color. It blocked the energy blade's sword energy and blasted Mu-En away. This was the first time Mu-En encountered such an opponent, and he actually used brute force to blow him away. Steadying her body in the air, surrounded by void energy, she transformed into Titania Phantom Butterfly Fairy and entered Razor Wing. Da-da-da! The Dex Fairy's bullets kept flying, shooting towards Apocalypse continuously. He knew that this strong man with brute force was the one summoned by Apocalypse. Facing Mu-En's attack, Tiankai seemed to be blind to it and did not make any defense. But Mu-En still failed to hit Apocalypse. A huge rock suddenly appeared in front of Apocalypse and blocked the continuous shooting. Then several more boulders flew up. The Black Knight jumped up and kicked the first boulder out. The boulder blasted towards the direction of the bullet like a heavy artillery. Although they didn't know where Mu-En was, it was always a good idea to attack in the direction where the bullet came from. The other huge rocks also turned into rock artillery and bombarded the direction where the bullet came from. These huge rocks forced Mu-En to dodge, while the Dex Fairy in his hand continued to shoot. Among the sarcophagi in the pyramid, another sarcophagus began to vibrate and disappeared from the pyramid wrapped in yellow sand, and the remaining two sarcophagi also began to frantically absorb the green energy. On the high platform opposite the Black Knight, a grey stone coffin wrapped in yellow sand slowly appeared. The moment he saw the grey coffin, the Black Knight's pupils suddenly shrank, a hideous smile appeared on his ferocious face. He broke a stone pillar beside him and threw it in the direction of the bullets shooting into the sky. The grey stone coffin made a buzzing sound that was getting louder and louder. The stone pillars around the platform broke one after another in the vibration, and even the stone coffin seemed to be unable to bear the weight and exploded. A slightly grey man appeared. He was also strong, but the most eye-catching thing was the power that kept fluctuating in his hands. Boom! The man slapped the stream of bullets in the air, and a visible shock wave instantly erupted from his hand, even instantly destroying the stone pillar thrown by the Black Knight and turning it into powder. Faced with such an attack, Mu-En was surrounded by energy again, and he instantly turned into limbo and entered the rift plane. As soon as he entered the rift plane, a violent shock wave penetrated his body and blew away the clouds in the sky. Another one. Mu-En fell to the ground with a frown on his face. The two warriors who came out of the coffin had already been corrupted just like Apocalypse. Although their corruption was not as obvious as Apocalypse's, the faint golden color emanating from their bodies was enough to prove that they were corrupted like Apocalypse. Their strength was enhanced during their corruption, whether it was the power of the Black Knight or the impact released by this grey-haired man, all of them had extremely powerful destructive power. This is really going to be a tough battle. After their corruption, they can now resist the suppressive effects of void energy, and their strength has also been greatly enhanced. As one side gained strength while the other lost strength, Mu-En's combat effectiveness was greatly restricted. Fortunately, he did not always rely on the suppressing effect of void energy to fight. Since the suppressive power of the void energy has lost its effect, he will use the attack armor to deal with them. Just as he was about to transform, changes occurred again on the pyramid side. Another coffin appeared on a high platform. This time the coffin was red. The terrifying temperature it emitted even melted the yellow sand around the coffin. The air began to distort under the horrible temperature. The red coffin became brighter and brighter, and suddenly it scattered like lava, revealing the person inside. It was a woman whose body was surrounded by flames. She and the grey-haired man put one hand on their chest and knelt on one knee to pay respect to Apocalypse. Grey Knight greets the master. Red Knight greets the master. As soon as he finished speaking, the last coffin disappeared from the pyramid and slowly appeared on the last platform. This is a white casket. Unlike the previous caskets, this casket did not undergo any drastic changes when opened. All one could see was the surrounding yellow sand gradually floating up, the white coffin gradually separating in the suspended yellow sand, and a woman wearing a golden crown walked out. He leaned forward slightly towards Tiankai and said to him with a smile, "White Knight greets the master. Welcome the coming of the true god." As she spoke, the surrounding sand and gravel were lifted up by an invisible force, repairing the broken parts of the pyramid. Seeing that his knights had all completed their rebirth, Apocalypse's indifferent expression finally changed. The reason why he didn't attack much just now was because he was combining the power of the pyramid with the remaining void energy in his body to resurrect the four horsemen. Now that his most loyal knights have been resurrected, their powers enhanced like his own, his plan can finally begin. Slowly falling from the sky, Apocalypse raised the scepter in his hand and pointed it from afar at Muen and the people behind him. Kill them. Chapter 97. Fight. Under Apocalypse's command, the four knights released their respective powers. As the only melee knight, the ground beneath the Black Knight's feet instantly shattered, and he shot at Muen and others like a heavy artillery. Behind him, two giant flaming pythons rushed quickly through the yellow sand, melting everything they passed by and turning it into boiling lava. Be careful, I won't be able to take care of your safety anymore. Reminding the people behind him, a burst of void energy enveloped him, and then a sharp sword energy burst out from it. The blue sword energy shot towards the Black Knight, while Muen turned into a sword light and rushed towards the Black Knight at a rapid speed. Facing the incoming sword energy, the Black Knight tilted his body, inserted one hand into the ground and exerted force suddenly, forcibly changing his path of advance and narrowly avoiding the sword energy of the glorious sword. The sword energy passed by the Black Knight and shot towards the two giant flaming pythons behind. Two ferocious fire pythons came towards the sword energy and bit down. The moment they came into contact with the sword energy, their heads were cut off and they turned into sparks and dissipated in the air. The head of the fire python grew out again. As a manipulated flame, the fire python had no shape at all. Even if its head was cut off, it could recover quickly. Muen had anticipated such a situation, and he did not pin his hopes on this sword energy. Under the cover of sword energy, Muen rushed to the Black Knight and slashed at the Black Knight with the glorious sword in his hand. The destructive power of the exalted sword is greater than that of the energy blade. Before, the energy blade forced the angels to use the scepter for defense. Now, the exalted sword, which is stronger than the energy blade, can definitely kill all these fallen. As the glorious sword was swung, another stream of sword energy shot out and attacked the Black Knight. Such an attack made the Black Knight, who was good at close combat, feel his hair stand on end. He stomped his feet on the ground and moved sideways to avoid the attack. The sword energy brushed past the armor on his shoulder and shot out, directly cutting through the armor with a faint golden hue, leaving a bloody mark on his shoulder. Then two giant fire pythons rushed up and sprayed flames at Muen, trying to melt Muen completely like the surrounding rocks. Unfortunately, at the moment the fire python spewed out flames, Muen turned into a sword light and passed through the fire python. The flames quickly melted the ground where Muen was before, turning it into hot and sticky lava. And at the moment of passing through the giant fire python, two sword energies shot out and continued to extend along the flaming body of the giant fire python. Wherever the sword energy passed, the body burning with flames continued to collapse. Under the destruction of the sword energy, the giant flaming python turned into scattered flames and quickly dissipated. But with the delay of the giant fire python, the Black Knight successfully broke away from Muen and rushed towards the others. He had just experienced the power of the magnificent sword in Muen's hand. That kind of power was not something he could resist. Once hit by the sword or the sword energy, he would at least be seriously injured. It would be better to leave such people to other knights to deal with, and he set his sights on Eric and the others. A heavy step on the ground was accompanied by a dull sound. The surrounding earth was shaking, and the sand and gravel on the ground were bounced off the ground. The Black Knight has extraordinary strength, and when facing other mutants, his strength can be fully displayed. Let's go together. Eric exerted force with both hands, and countless metals buried deep in the ruins broke out of the ground and shot towards the Black Knight at a rapid speed. Others also took action, even Angel and Psylocke joined in. They were not that loyal to Apocalypse, and now that Apocalypse wanted to kill them all, they would not continue to follow him. The other knights will certainly not let the Black Knight fight alone. Besides, their greatest master is here, so they will definitely perform well. The Grey Knight and the White Knight looked at each other, nodded slightly, and each chose their opponent. Countless sand soldiers quickly collapsed, and under the control of the White Knight, they turned into spears and flew into the sky. Wow! The spear changed direction in the air, aimed at Eric and the others and shot out, making a roar in the air. Cheen! Charles, who was half leaning against the wall, shouted loudly after seeing the White Knight's attack. Cheen, who was guarding beside him in a trance, quickly came to her senses and looked up at the spears that were shooting towards her. She raised her hands with force, and the scattered sand and gravel around her quickly gathered in the air. Under her control, they turned into two huge stone walls, one guarding above the crowd, and the other rushing towards the spears. The two stone walls worked well together, especially the one that rushed towards the spears, which blocked a large number of rock spears. The two sides fought back and forth, and the Black Knight was entangled by the crowd. With the help of Blue Demon Kurt and Pietro, everyone dodged the Black Knight's attacks while fighting back. Compared to their intense competition, Muen seemed a little passive. His two opponents were mutants with long-range attack capabilities. The Red Knight's flames turned into countless fire snakes that attacked him. Every time he destroyed the fire snakes, he would be greeted by the shock wave released by the Grey Knight. The continuous attacks from the two made Muen somewhat passive, and the stone statues that Apocalypse constantly summoned that could release blue rays made him even more troubled. We have to deal with this shock guy first. The biggest threat to him now is the attack of the Grey Knights. Whenever that powerful attack that can turn objects into powder comes, Muen has to use his glorious sword to deal with it with all his strength. As for the threats from the Red Knights and those stone statues, they were secondary. Most of the time they were suppressing him and leaving him to face the attacks of the Grey Knights. With a wave of his hand, the stone statue that was summoned again was blasted, and a number of energy swords appeared around Muen. Javelin, come and try this trick. As soon as he finished speaking, the energy swords surrounding him shot out instantly, gathered together under his guidance, and turned into a river of swords that shot towards the Grey Knight. Shhhhhhh. All the energy of the sword flew out, making a sharp sound in the air. Boom! Facing the oncoming sword, the Grey Knight clapped his hands violently, and a violent attack instantly erupted, rushing towards Muen. He wanted to destroy all the energy swords that were shot at him and attack Muen again. But the actual situation was beyond his expectations. The energy directly penetrated the energy shock he released and continued to burst towards him. And his attack was still blocked by the magnificent sword in Muen's hand as before. Laugh! The energy sword shot out like a sharp spear and pierced his body fiercely. The Grey Knight doesn't have the ability to heal itself, such an attack is already considered a serious injury to him, and the prominent sword in Muen's hand released an extremely strong light, covering him and the Red Knight. There was a vast expanse of white in front of the two men's eyes, making it impossible for them to see clearly what was around them, and even their ears were buzzing. The severely damaged Grey Knight released his charge around him to prevent Muen from attacking. A violent shock wave, as if it were real, spread out from his body, and the ground was quickly destroyed by the shock wave. Chapter 98, Shock and Collapse, the flames dissipated. But how could Muen give up such a good opportunity? Taking advantage of the moment when they lost their vision, Muen raised his hand and swung out several sword energies, then used a sudden slash, transforming into a sword light and killing the Grey Knight. The several sword energies in front of him became his shield, cutting off the continuously spreading shock waves and clearing a path for him. Soon, Muen passed through a large number of shock waves and stumbled across the Grey Knight. The sharp energy blade of the glorious sword directly tore the Grey Knight's body into pieces. Even though they became fallen, that only gave them the ability to resist the effects of void energy. Even if they were strengthened after the fall, they still could not avoid the fate of being beheaded when facing the attack of the glorious sword. After all, the fallen only have one life. The Grey Knight's body was torn into pieces, and his head fell to the ground with lifeless eyes. After dealing with the Grey Knight, Muen turned his attention to the Red Knight. This mutant who controls fire has been greatly improved after his corruption. The difference between the fire he controlled in the past and now is really huge. When her vision returned, she saw the Grey Knight lying on the ground, torn to pieces. That was her companion whom she had been with day and night, but he was killed by Muen just like that. This made the flames surrounding her body even more intense. A huge cobra made of flames appeared under her feet, spitting out its tongue at Muen, and spewing out flames in a larger range, covering Muen and everything around him. Boom! As flames filled the sky, Muen was engulfed in the fierce sea of fire, and the place turned into a large pool of lava in an instant. However, Muen was not harmed by the flames. When the Red Knight launched the attack, he had already thought of how to deal with these fallen ones. At the moment the sea of fire descended, he entered the rift plane of limbo and rushed towards the Red Knight in the flames. Muen, who was in a parallel dimension, was not afraid of the flames that could melt the earth. He walked freely in the flames and quickly approached the Red Knight. The moment he approached the Red Knight, Muen transformed into Excalibur Holy Sword and rushed out of the rift plane. The glorious sword in his hand directly cut off the Red Knight's neck. Flames were still burning on her body, and because she was beheaded by Mu-En, the flames instantly engulfed her body. It is really sad that a mutant who can control fire was eventually engulfed by flames. However, this did not stop Mu-En. At the moment the Red Knight died, Apocalypse also launched an attack on him. A blue-grey ray shot out from his scepter, but Mu-En had no intention of fighting with Apocalypse at all. He planned to get rid of all of Apocalypse's subordinates first. In order to avoid being blocked by his subordinates every time as before, he transformed into Limbo and slipped back to the Rift Plane. An Apocalypse's attack followed suit, penetrating his body and landing on the ground, destroying everything around Mu-En. However, the changes in the material plane had no effect on Mu-En, who was in the Rift Plane. No matter how Apocalypse attacked him, Mu-En was still safe and sound. Even with the explosion as cover, his whereabouts became even more elusive. When Mu-En reappeared in front of everyone, he had already appeared in front of the Black Knight, and slashed down with the glorious sword in his hand. "Help me!" the Black Knight yelled. Although Mu-En's appearance was very abrupt, they all saw the death scenes of the Red Knight and the Grey Knight. They dared not relax at all. The moment they saw Mu-En, the Black Knight cooperated with the White Knight and successfully avoided Mu-En's illustrious sword with the help of the White Knight's telekinesis. Then the two continued to cooperate, and countless boulders flew towards the Black Knight under the control of the White Knight. The moment the boulders flew towards him, the Black Knight kicked the boulders towards Mu-En, and the boulders hit him like cannonballs. But the Black Knight had used this kind of attack before, and now it had no effect on Mu-En. Facing the boulder that was shooting towards him, Mu-En waved his hand and swung out a sword energy, and the flying boulder was directly cut off and flew to both sides. Then he rushed directly towards the Black Knight. He had to deal with this only melee enemy first. Seeing Mu-En rushing towards him again, the Black Knight jumped into the air with both legs and kept punching the flying boulders controlled by the White Knight towards Mu-En. There were roars in the sky, and countless huge rocks fell like a rainstorm. Mu-En, who was standing on the ground, was especially targeted by the rain of rocks. Countless huge rocks hit Mu-En. Faced with the continuous rain of falling boulders, not to mention Mu-En, who was given special care, even the others had to temporarily avoid the spotlight. There was no expression on Mu-En's face. He raised his hand and shot out sword energy with his magnificent sword, chopping the boulders that kept falling from above his head into pieces. The torrential rain of boulders did not cause any harm to Mu-En, but instead piled the gravel under his feet into a small hill. "Now, it's my turn." Mu-En shot into the air like an arrow, and with a flash of sword light, the glorious sword slashed at the Black Knight in the air. But the Black Knight floating in the air was still under the control of the White Knight. Facing Mu-En, who turned into sword light and made a sudden slash, the Black Knight rose again in the air and avoided the attack of the sword light. But Mu-En still pursued and attacked relentlessly, using the sudden slash again, turning into a sword light and rushing towards the Black Knight in the air. While rushing towards the Black Knight, Mu-En also released his javelin, surrounded by a large number of energy swords, and rushed towards the Black Knight in the air. The hunted Black Knight would naturally not sit still and wait to die. Under the control of the White Knight, his body suddenly shook and changed direction in the air. This move of the dragon's tail directly shook off Mu-En. When Mu-En used a sudden attack on the Black Knight, the opponent flew towards the huge rock below at a high speed. The condensed boulder fell in front of the Black Knight. Looking at the approaching sword light, the Black Knight clasped his hands on the boulder and threw it towards Mu-En, who fell from the sky. And above Mu-En, a huge rock appeared at some point, and the two rocks, one above and one below, seemed to want to smash Mu-En into a meat paste. But Mu-En is not limited to using the glorious sword. During the fall, Mu-En instantly turned into Limbo and entered the Rift Plane, easily passing through the boulder thrown by the Black Knight. The moment he returned to the material plane, an invisible crack energy flew out from his hand and spread towards the Black Knight. The Black Knight, who was being controlled to fly by the White Knight, suddenly lost contact with the White Knight. With no one to help him fly, the Black Knight could only let himself fall to the ground. In other words, he has thick skin and strong physique, so he can ignore the damage of free fall from a high altitude. If it were someone else, he would probably fall directly to the ground and become a bloody mess. As soon as he landed, he heard a roar above his head. Looking up, he saw several energy swords close at hand. Chapter 99, The Four Horsemen are destroyed. The Black Knight, who was in the Rift Plane, could no longer get help from the White Knight. Facing the oncoming energy swords, he swung his fists violently, trying to defeat them. However, the energy sword released by the javelin possessed a power far beyond his imagination. Although he couldn't cut off his body, it wasn't that easy to resist. Even though he was extremely strong, he couldn't use that powerful force to block Muen's energy sword. His entire arm was pierced by the energy sword, and then more energy swords came one after another, attacking his head, heart, and vital points all over his body. Chi chi chi! As a long energy sword pierced his head, the extremely powerful Black Knight finally died. However, to be on the safe side, Muen still released a sword energy, splitting the Black Knight's body into two. Now the White Knight and Apocalypse were a little panicked. Not long after, Muen killed 3 knights in succession. Now that Muen has set his sights on them, they must be on guard. Muen, who was in the Rift Plane, did not choose to return to the material plane, but rushed directly towards the White Knight with powerful telekinesis. Seeing the warrior wielding the energy sword rushing towards him, the White Knight raised his hand and released his telekinesis. The surrounding sand and gravel quickly gathered together and turned into a giant hand that grabbed towards Muen. But how could things from the material plane possibly touch Muen in the Rift Plane? Instead, the giant hand became a stepping stone for Muen, allowing him to leap high and rush towards the White Knight in a flash of sword light. Seeing that his attack had no effect, the White Knight immediately flew into the sky, flying towards the direction of Apocalypse. She knew that she was no match for this strange warrior. Her telekinesis couldn't even work on Muen. Now she was like a lamb to be slaughtered and could only seek protection from her master. Apocalypse still cherishes this last knight very much. After all, the White Knight was his subordinate who persisted until he was completely safe when he encountered rebellion during his last transfer. Such a loyal subordinate is not easy to find, and he will not give up on her. The green energy on the pyramid gathered on his scepter and in an instant turned into several beams of light as thick as bowls that shot towards Muen. In fact, Apocalypse also felt strange. The Rhino Horn warrior on the opposite side seemed to have some kind of power. No matter how they attacked, they could not touch him. This was different from the opponent's previous performance. The sharp contrast made him a little confused. The opponent was just like the energy that resurrected him, both of them were unpredictable. Several beams of light fell on Muen, but did not cause any harm to him, and he was not even able to stop them. However, Apocalypse had already anticipated all of this, and he was not surprised when he saw the other party safely pass through his attack. He waved his hand and released 2 balls of green energy, which turned into a shield to wrap around him and the White Knight. Attack the moment he strikes. After several rounds of attacks, he has found a pattern. When Muen is not attacking, he will not suffer any harm. But once he attacks, he will come out of that strange state, and that is the best time for them to attack. After being reminded by his master, the White Knight surrounded by a green shield looked at Muen who was rushing towards him, with his mental power ready to attack at any time. Seeing that the White Knight became fearless under the green shield, Muen snorted coldly, and the glorious sword in his hand became brighter. Shoo! The moment he stepped out of the Rift Plane, Muen swung his sword, and powerful sword energy burst out instantly, killing towards the White Knight. The White Knight also activated her telekinesis the moment Muen attacked, and she directly released 2 attacks. The first time was to use telekinesis to twist Muen's body, but unfortunately, although her telekinesis was strong, it was still unable to twist the body of Excalibur Holy Sword, so this first attack failed. The second attack came from the hard boulders flying from all around. Countless boulders came from all directions and squeezed Muen in the center under her control. As she clenched her fists, the boulders were squeezed tightly together and became tighter and tighter. Boom! The increasingly compact boulder suddenly exploded, and a huge sword energy burst out from it, shattered the boulder and shot towards the White Knight. The huge sword energy was so fast that the White Knight had no time to dodge. He was instantly split in half by the sword energy, breaking into 2 halves in the air and falling to the ground. And Muen had disappeared. There was no trace of him behind the sword energy. It seemed that Muen had been torn into pieces along with the boulder. In fact, the situation was not much different. The boulder controlled by the White Knight wanted to crush Muen, and he also controlled countless boulders to continuously merge in and continue the compression. The increasingly hard boulder forced Muen to gather all his strength and break it into pieces like he was breaking a pyramid. He fell with the boulder because the energy of his armor was instantly depleted. Fortunately, his energy recovery speed was quite good, and he had fully recovered halfway through the fall. Kill! The death of his last subordinate made Apocalypse furious. He drew the cyan energy of the pyramid and released countless cyan beams. The shattered boulder was enveloped by the beam of light and was completely shattered before it hit the ground. Nice attack, but unfortunately it missed. Mu En's voice sounded behind him, and the glorious sword and energy blade attacked from behind him. Clang! Apocalypse swung the scepter and turned around, lashing out. The cyan energy transformed the scepter into a cyan sword, blocking the attacking energy blades and glorious swords. Afterwards, the green energy around him became more concentrated and turned into a shield, blocking the sword energy. Ha! Mu En smiled sarcastically, holding the glorious sword and energy blade tightly in his hands, and launched continuous attacks on Tiankai. Every attack would fade the color of the cyan shield, and the cyan energy would be quickly consumed in a breath. Seeing that the shield could no longer hold on, Apocalypse activated the energy of the scepter and shot a blue beam towards Mu En. The green energy on the pyramid surged even more wildly, condensing at the top of the pyramid and transforming into a beam of light larger than a person, shooting towards Mu En. Faced with such an attack, Mu En swung his sword fiercely to block the beam of light, and instantly transformed into Titania Phantom Butterfly Fairy, shrinking his body and rushing to the side. A green beam of light fell behind Mu En and caused a violent explosion the moment it hit the ground. When the smoke and dust cleared, only a rolling pool of lava could be seen. The failed attack did not stop Apocalypse, as he had already seen what Mu En had transformed into, a group of butterflies emitting a metallic luster in the sunlight. He controlled 2 light beams of different sizes and shot them towards the butterflies. He was determined to destroy all of them. Although the razor butterflies have extremely fast flying speed, facing this large-scale attack, many of them are still melted in the light column. But Apocalypse still didn't find Mu En's shadow, so he could only continue to destroy the razor butterflies surrounding him. Chapter 100, Destroy Apocalypse. Until the last razor butterfly was destroyed, Apocalypse still couldn't find Mu En. While he was still searching for Mu En, his cyan protective shield broke, and a shadow rushed over, with a magnificent sword formed by energy that kept growing larger. Apocalypse tried his best to resist and used the scepter in his hand to block the glorious sword. But Mu En did not stop. The moment the glorious sword was blocked, he drew out the energy blade and turned around to swing it. Squeak! A teeth grinding sound was heard, and the energy blade left a deep mark on Apocalypse's golden armor. Then the glorious sword slashed towards Apocalypse again. The 2 swords were like flowing water, and the attack seemed extremely fierce. Facing Mu En's attack, Tiankai could only try his best to resist. The mighty sword posed too great a threat to him. In order to prevent the terrifying sword energy from tearing him apart, he could only constantly control the blue energy to protect himself. Even so, the green energy in his body was still decreasing. Oh, you can't hold on. Energy poured into the glorious sword, making it brighter and brighter. With a slash of the sword, it released a powerful sword energy. Snort! The sword energy hit the green energy shield fiercely, and the shield instantly disappeared like a burst bubble. Apocalypse was pierced by the sword energy and his head was cut off directly. Although he possessed super self-healing abilities, that was not immortality after all, and his head could not recover quickly. Under Mu En's sword attack, his body was torn into pieces, turned into a bloody rain in the air, and completely dissipated. It is finally over. The moment he killed Tiankai again, Mu En breathed a sigh of relief. This battle was the most strenuous one he had ever experienced. The fallen Apocalypse summoned his former 4 horsemen. If he hadn't skillfully used the different powers of several armors to switch back and forth, he probably wouldn't have been able to deal with these fallen ones. Falling from the air, Mu En regained his form in a wave of energy and moved his body to relax. Thump! An energy crystal emitting a faint glow fell in front of him. The energy in it was very familiar to Mu En. Haha, this really has become a game. Even the void light body fell out. Picking up the crystallized void light body from the ground, Mu En laughed. He didn't have any void relics now, so he didn't know what the use of giving him some void light bodies would be. After putting away the void light body, he turned his attention to the pyramid in front of him. Although Apocalypse is dead, the pyramid is still constantly transforming sunlight, and the patterns on it are already filled with green energy. With so much energy, I'm afraid we can directly extract 7 essences, right? Having said that, he used the void dash and rushed towards the top of the pyramid. It is the core of sunlight transformation and the source of pyramid energy. The efficiency of extracting essence there will be higher. Landing on the top of the pyramid, the void energy in Mu En's hand surged, covering the patterns on the top of the pyramid. The reason why he kept attacking Apocalypse was to avoid destroying the pyramid. This amount of energy was enough for him to extract the essence of I. Soon, the shadow of I essence appeared in his hand. As time passed, one I essence after another was successfully extracted. As expected, the pyramid provided him with 7 I essences, increasing the number of I essences in his hand from 14 to 21. Now, I can create 5 battle armors. Before, he only created Excalibur Holy Sword in the future, and then he returned here because of the time turbulence. He hadn't thought much about the other armors yet, but now that everything was over, he could finally consider which armors to create. After returning from the pyramid, Muen stroked his chin and fell into deep thought, thinking about what kind of armor to create. But Charles shouted out loudly. "Take a deep breath, Jean, stay calm, and let your power calm down." Jean exuded a powerful aura, a power that could destroy everything that made everyone break out in cold sweats. Fortunately, Jean was following Charles's instructions and trying to calm her own power, so that her power did not run away. However, this still caught Muen's attention. The destructive aura brought him back to his senses immediately. After seeing Jean floating in the air and emitting a faint sense of power, Muen remembered that Jean seemed to have the power of the phoenix stored in her body. Although it is only a part of the phoenix force, it is enough to destroy many things. Compared with Apocalypse, who calls himself God, the phoenix force in Jean's body is the real divine power. That shouldn't be the case. She has never used the phoenix force, and Charles's mental prison should not have been released. How could the phoenix force go berserk? Looking at Jean, who was emitting such a powerful aura, Muen was extremely puzzled. Seeing that Jean was about to collapse, the powerful power of the phoenix was about to be released. A stream of void energy shot out from Muen's hand and wrapped up Jean. The seal of the ability caused the phoenix force that was about to be released to disappear instantly. It was not that the void energy could block such a powerful force as the phoenix force, but because the phoenix force needed a channel to be released. Now that its power is sealed, the phoenix force has no channel to vent and can only calm down gradually on its own. After seeing Jean, whose power was sealed, falling from the air, Eric controlled a large amount of metal, turning it into a magnetic iron bed, and slowly lowered Jean to the ground. Charles, her power. Eric was shocked by Jean's power. If Jean had exploded with that kind of power just now, Apocalypse and his subordinates would have been destroyed instantly. He knew too well the destructive power of that kind of force, which was more powerful than Apocalypse. Not to mention building a tower out of sand, even reshaping the earth would only take a thought. Yes, Jean possesses a very terrifying power. She has been suppressing that power. If she were to release that power with all her strength, everything would become nothingness. This power is not simple. Fortunately, I sealed her ability before she released it. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that any of you can survive. Muen withdrew the power of the void and spoke slowly as he looked at Jean, who had fallen into a coma with her breathing calmed down. And in his hands, the power of the void was wrapping around a group of intercepted phoenix power. Although it was just the breath of the phoenix force, the power contained in it was equally terrifying, which gave Muen the idea of studying it. Perhaps he could get some important information from the breath of the phoenix power, and even apply this breath to the armor to make the armor more powerful. Jean, wake up, Jean. At the call of Charles and others, Jean woke up from her coma soon. She looked at everyone with a confused face at first, and then she remembered that her power had gone out of control. Professor, It's okay. Charles patted her shoulder. Your power has not been released. Chapter 101, Make up for the shortcomings. Everything is over, peace has returned here, and everyone is moving, preparing to return to Xavier College. But before leaving, Charles asked Eric to erase all the patterns on the pyramid and leave with the golden spire of the pyramid. The pyramids can absorb sunlight and convert it into that kind of cyan energy, which is something very worth studying for the world. However, after witnessing the battle between Muen and Apocalypse, he saw the destructive power caused by the blue energy condensed in the pyramid. Because he understood the bad nature of human beings and the threat that thing posed to mutants, he asked Eric to smooth out the patterns on the pyramid. As for the golden spire, in addition to using gold to subsidize the academy, there is another important reason, which is to study the patterns on it and add some security measures to the academy. To prevent similar incidents from happening again, where people are caught completely defenseless and have no ability to resist. Back at the academy, an excited Eric rushed into the academy and hugged his wife and daughter tightly under the shocked gaze of many students. The students were not shocked that they hugged each other, but were shocked that Magneto, who had been wanted on TV broadcasts, actually appeared in front of them. Then, they saw more people walking into the school, including Hank with tattered clothes, Logan with his upper body naked, and so on. Some were familiar and some were unfamiliar, all walked into the college. Among them, the professor's image was the most eye-catching. His long hair had turned into a bald head. "Professor!" The students greeted him one after another. They looked at Charles's smooth head curiously, not understanding why the professor had changed to such a new hairstyle. Charles didn't care. He knew that the students had no ill intentions. They were just a little confused. After walking through the corridor, everyone came to Charles's office. He sat in a wheelchair in the office and looked at everyone. "Thank you all for your efforts. Our world is protected once again." As he spoke, he looked at Mu-En. Many of them were members of the X-Force who had witnessed Mu-En being blown to death 20 years ago. "Although I got the news from my future self that you are still alive, it is indeed a happy thing to see you again. Yet, we all thought you were dead at the time. After all, you disappeared with the explosion." Alex finished speaking. Everyone looked at Mu-En with curiosity. They wanted to know where Mu-En had been all these years and why he only came back today, 20 years later. "Haha, I won't talk about my story. It's a rather complicated matter." Waving to everyone, Mu-En smiled and said that he did not tell everyone about what happened after his resurrection. After all, it was a troublesome matter and he was most afraid of trouble. After that, everyone turned their attention to Eric. This guy now has a happy family and there is no trace of his past cruel state. 10 years ago, Eric almost killed a high-ranking human official in public. If it weren't for Raven's intervention, the mutants' current situation would probably be even worse. But now, Eric has become the only one among everyone who has a complete family. He has a daughter and even a son who is growing up so fast that he can't be seen. Everyone was chatting in the office, enjoying the hard-earned peace. In Cairo, a large number of armed helicopters flew over the pyramids and patrolled around them. The ground was full of parked cars, and experts from all over the world were rushing here. This huge pyramid was built by mutants, and the residents here can testify to that. Their houses and cars suddenly turned into dust and dissipated, condensing into a huge pyramid. However, that pyramid has disappeared because someone split the pyramid, causing it to collapse completely. Soon after, this larger pyramid appeared. Some people saw with their own eyes a huge blue beam of light emitting from the pyramid, and the huge pool of cooled lava on the ground was left by the beam of light. At first, the experts were reluctant to believe it, but after seeing the cooled charred lava pool, they had to accept it. They can't look at these things with common sense, especially when it comes to mutants. Previously, mutants controlled people all over the world and launched all the nuclear bombs. It is not impossible that there are mutants who can control matter and use pyramids to release beams of light, but they have to be careful. Of course, they must obtain the technology that uses pyramids to release light beams. That technology is likely to develop into energy weapons, and they will never give up. Experts from all over the world have entered the pyramid, looking for such technology, hoping to win the Nobel Prize or even name a new prize after themselves. Days pass by. Mu-En has been living in Xavier College. After this battle, he has realized the shortcomings of the armor's power. Although each armor has its own expertise, in some battles, the power of these armors is simply too weak. He planned to create as many amplitude crystals as possible to strengthen the armor, making the armor more powerful and able to deal with various crises that might arise in the future. All the expenses for his research came from the commission Charles gave him. The 500,000 commission from 20 years ago plus the reward for this operation, Charles directly took out 50 million and gave it to Mu-En. Of course, there was a reason why Charles was so generous. In addition to the fact that the commission of 500,000 had increased a lot in the past 20 years, it was also because of the huge golden pyramid tip they brought back. A large part of that thing was made of gold. After rubbing the patterns of the pyramid, Alex cut the huge spire into a large number of gold bricks. The gold became the Academy's reserve, making the Academy's finances sound and no longer having to worry about the increasing number of mutant students. All the commission that Charles gave to Moon was used by him to purchase various materials and transport them to the room he converted into a laboratory. Mu-En did not directly manufacture amplitude crystals, but used various materials to manufacture the first generation of casting chambers. The first generation casting cabin looks a bit crude, but some basic functions can already be realized. However, in order to produce amplitude crystals more quickly, Mu-en used this first casting chamber to start manufacturing a new generation of casting chambers. It has to be said that although it is only the first generation of casting cabin, the manufacturing efficiency has been greatly improved. Although the new generation of casting cabin process is more complicated, the time required for manufacturing has been greatly reduced. Soon a more sophisticated casting chamber was built, which looked more sophisticated. Haha, now we can start making amplitude crystals. The data instructions of various amplitude crystals are input into the casting chamber, and then the materials required for the amplitude crystals are loaded into the casting chamber. As the casting chamber is started, amplitude crystals with different strength increases are produced from the casting chamber. It really paid off that I spent so much time making the casting chamber. The manufacturing efficiency has really improved a lot. Chapter 102, Making Crystals. The production of a large number of amplitude crystals allows all of Mu-en's armor to be strengthened. Of course, these mass-produced ones are just some basic crystals, and those special amplitude crystals still need to be manufactured carefully. Soon the iron box beside him was filled with amplitude crystals. These basic amplitude crystals can be directly integrated into the weapons of the armor, which can give the armor a huge boost. He transformed into Zuko Resonance of the Void and picked up a golden amplitude crystal called Concentration. Energy surrounded his hand, and the amplitude crystal gradually dissipated in the energy and merged into the armor. He then took out other amplitude crystals and strengthened various aspects of the armor. It also specially integrated golden amplitude crystals named Continuous Flow and Simplified. One increases the energy limit of the armor, and the other reduces the energy consumption rate. He had already suffered from insufficient energy. If Excalibur Holy Sword had fused the two amplitude crystals during the battle with Apocalypse, then the pyramid would not have been shattered, but split in two like splitting Mount Hawa. After fusing these crystals for Zuko Resonance of the Void, Mu-en's energy flashed and he instantly transformed into other armors, continuing to fuse various amplitude crystals. The energy in his body changed several times in succession, and Mu-en finally completed the basic enhancement of all the armor, and there were only a few amplitude crystals left in the iron box. Next, we can create those special amplitude crystals. There are many types of special amplitude crystals, each with its own unique powers. There are corrupted amplitude crystals that enhance corresponding attributes to a higher degree by reducing other attributes. There are nightmare amplitude crystals that enhance two different attributes. There are enhanced amplitude crystals specifically for specific weapons and armor, and there are combined amplitude crystals that can be combined to obtain higher enhancements like a suit. These amplitude crystals have special abilities, many of which are indispensable and can even play important functions at critical times. Glancing at the amplitude crystals scattered in the iron box, Mu-en was silent for a while. Let's build a space container first. He has more and more things on him, and the number of amplitude crystals will be even larger in the future. It is impossible for him to carry so many things on his back, so a container to store these items is naturally indispensable. Fortunately, the knowledge transmitted from the void contains space storage technology. After pondering for a moment, Mu-en walked towards the casting cabin. He planned to make a special belt and put everything into the belt. Switching the casting cabin to manual mode, Mu-en began to manufacture the space belt. The belt itself is not difficult to manufacture, but the modules connected to the belt are really difficult. This belt is composed of a large number of independent intelligent modules, and the actual location of space storage is also in these modules. Of course, there are relatively few things now, and Mu-en does not plan to manufacture these modules in large quantities. After all, this is a very laborious task. As time passed, the first intelligent module was manufactured. It was just a prototype, and Mu-en had no plans to equip it. He has gained a lot of manufacturing experience from this module, and next time he will make a more perfect intelligent module. Under his operation, 4 intelligent modules were manufactured in the casting cabin and combined with the belt body to become a space belt that can store various items. The space of the smart module is not large. Each smart module is only 1 cubic meter. In addition, each smart module exists independently, so these spaces will not be combined together to form a larger space. Fortunately, Mu-en didn't plan to install any big objects. These 4 intelligent modules were enough for him. He even planned what to install in these modules. The 2 on the left were used to store amplitude crystals, the front one was used to store basic amplitude crystals, and the back one was used to store special amplitude crystals. As for the 2 on the right, the front one is used to store personal belongings, and the back one is used to store weapons and equipment. In this way, the functions of the 4 smart modules are all distributed. When you want to store something, you only need to place the item on the spherical protrusion in the center of the smart module to complete the storage. If you want to take something out, just press the smart module lightly, the belt will project a light curtain, and after selecting the thing you want to take out, it will be ejected. This is much more convenient than carrying everything with you and searching for it when you need it. After replacing the belt, the next thing he really needs to do is to make those special amplitude crystals. As for the special amplitude crystals, Mu-En had already made a choice in his mind. He planned to make the fallen amplitude crystals first. After all, the fallen amplitude crystals were the most powerful ones for strengthening armor and weapons and equipment. With the corrupted amplitude crystal, his weapons and armor can unleash even greater power. The first corrupted amplitude crystal to be identified is called Momentary Fortitude, an amplitude crystal that increases the power of a warframe's abilities by reducing their duration. This is a very good fallen amplitude crystal. After all, in many cases, the attack of the warframe will directly kill the target, so the duration is dispensable. Soon Mu-En was immersed in the instant and determined manufacturing. He seemed very serious about this amplitude crystal and was very careful for fear of making mistakes. In this solemn atmosphere, instant perseverance gradually took shape in his hands and was finally successfully created. I finally finished it. I didn't expect that making such a small amplitude crystal would be so tiring. After completing the manufacturing, Mu-En touched the sweat on his forehead. It was the first time he realized that high-tech manufacturing was more tiring than fighting. If it weren't for the fact that this amplitude crystal could make up for his current shortcomings, he would never manufacture this amplitude crystal again. After resting for a while, he took out the instant fortitude from the manufacturing cabin. This fallen amplitude crystal exuded a golden luster and it was obvious at a glance that it was not an ordinary item. Next, we will create the Blind Rage grip to increase the strength of the ability. Blind Rage increases the strength of the ability by increasing the energy consumption of the warframe. If fused, it can greatly increase the destructive power of the warframe. Although the energy consumed by the ability will also increase, the combat effectiveness has been improved after all. He returned to the casting chamber and started working seriously again. He wanted to produce all the amplitude crystals in one go. As time passed, one amplitude crystal after another was produced in Mu-En's hands. Some were used to strengthen armor, and some were used to strengthen equipment. All the fallen amplitude crystals were produced by him. Of course, these are not the only things Mu-En produced. He also produced amplitude crystals specifically for armor and weapons and equipment. There is the brilliant blade that strengthens the exalted blade, the blade wing strike that strengthens the razor wing, and the rift sanctuary that strengthens the exile. Chapter 103. Strengthening. A large number of amplitude crystals were produced, which can strengthen weapons and armor in various aspects. For example, Excalibur Holy Sword, which currently has the strongest attack power in Mu-En's hand, can release attacks of different attributes by changing the color of energy after obtaining the colorful sword, which allows him to deal with many different situations. He picked up the colorful sword, and as the energy in his hand surged, the amplitude crystal merged into Excalibur Holy Sword. Mu-En just waved his hand, and a blue sword appeared, with a large number of electric arcs bursting out of it, telling Mu-En that it had a strong electric shock attribute. He was very satisfied with the magnificent sword surrounded by electric current. Then the color of the energy in his hand began to change quietly from blue to red. The electricity surrounding the glorious sword disappeared, replaced by scorching flames. The glorious sword transformed into a red one, and its attribute changed from electric shock to flame. The scorching flames released from it raised the temperature of the entire laboratory by several degrees. Seeing that the temperature in the laboratory was rising, in order to prevent any malfunction of his instruments and equipment, the energy color of the glorious sword changed again from red to white. A wisp of white mist emanated from the glorious sword, and the cold breath spread out instantly, rapidly dropping the temperature of the laboratory, and even large ice crystals began to condense on the wall near the glorious sword. The white energy represents the opposite attribute of fire, namely, ice. Although only some white frost can be seen on the glorious sword, its power has not been weakened. The power of the glorious sword is still strong. After the temperature in the laboratory was restored, the exalted sword changed again and turned green. This time, it can be clearly seen on the glorious sword that countless sticky green energies are attached to the energy blade of the glorious sword. Green represents toxins, which are deadly poisons. Just a small wound will cause the toxins to spread rapidly throughout the wound. These 4 different attributes allow Mu-En to cope with many different battles. The most important thing is that he can make the attributes of the glorious sword more varied by replacing the amplitude crystals with different attributes. It allows him to release more attacks with different attributes when facing different types of opponents. After removing the glorious sword, Mu-En's whole body flashed with light and turned into Zaku Echo of the Void. The attack effect of Zaku's Resonance of the Void has also become weak, so he plans to improve the attack ability of this armor. After choosing among the amplitude crystals for a while, he had 8 different amplitude crystals in his hand. Blind Rage, Momentary Fortitude, Overextension, Concentration, Continuous Flow, Extension, Endurance, Prophecy, Mystery. These are the best crystals that Mu-En can currently produce, and they are also the best combinations he can currently make. Of course, if he can master the technology to manufacture more advanced amplitude crystals, then the armor will be enhanced to an even more powerful level. But for now, Zaku's Resonance of the Void ability has been qualitatively improved, and can exert even more powerful combat power. If he fights Tiankai again now, he might not be able to break free so easily. At this time, Zaku's Resonance of the Void has an ability strength of 239%, and the power it can burst out is more than twice that of the previous armor. Using such armor to fight against Apocalypse again can be said to be completely crushing Apocalypse, but this is just the beginning. If he is given time to master the manufacturing technology of advanced amplitude crystals and rift amplitude crystals, or even the research and development technology of amplitude crystals, he can make the armor even more powerful. That's all for now. Later, we need to strengthen our grasp of advanced amplitude crystals and rift amplitude crystals. And if we can master the research and development technology of amplitude crystals, we should be able to make some more special amplitude crystals ourselves. Soon, he fused different amplitude crystals into the other 2 armors and strengthened all the armors. Next, it's the weapons and equipment on him. He doesn't have much equipment, so it's much faster to strengthen it. 2 Rex twin guns, an energy blade, and a battle blade have also been fused with amplitude crystals, which further enhances their destructive power. After strengthening these equipment, Mu-En did not stop, but continued to operate the casting chamber. Since the foundry was right in front of him, he might as well make more equipment, especially weapons and ammunition, to meet his various needs in battle. Under his operation, the materials in the laboratory were rapidly decreasing, while a lot of equipment appeared around him. The most numerous of them were various types of ammunition, which were enough for him to complete a small war without using any abilities. He picked up the sniper rifle that had just been made and reached out to stroke it gently. This gun looked different from a normal sniper rifle. It looks like a large, modified revolver, especially the magazine that holds 5 bullets, which is exactly the same as a revolver. Come to think of it, this kind of sniper rifle is the first of its kind in reality. Thinking of such a sniper rifle appearing in front of the world, Mu-En laughed in his heart. He estimated that if he put this gun in front of everyone, they would think he was joking. Putting aside the Jolu, Mu-En picked up the Paris bow instead. He would never forget this bow. After all, the image of the arrow shooting up the spaceship was still lingering in his mind. The Paris bow is also different from normal bows and arrows. This bow can use the magnetic field to store power, so that the arrows shot are strong enough to penetrate heavy armor. He tried to pull the bowstring. It didn't take much force to pull the bowstring, but a magnetic force surrounded the place where he pulled the bowstring. Magnetic slingshot. He put down the Paris bow with a smile. He already knew the design of the bow, but if he wanted to achieve the effect of shooting up the spaceship in his memory, he still had to speed up his mastery of the technology of amplitude crystals. After strengthening all the equipment, he placed the equipment and amplitude crystals in the space belt. Now he had to try the breath of the Phoenix. Maybe he could get some different powers from the breath of the Phoenix force. The void energy flowed in his hands, and the aura of the Phoenix wrapped in the power of the void appeared in his hands. I wonder what benefits this breath of Phoenix power can bring me. He was well aware of the power of the Phoenix. After all, it was a powerful force that was born at the beginning of all things. Even though this is just the breath of the Phoenix force, it is also somewhat contaminated with some of the power of the Phoenix. If it can be used reasonably, it may be able to unleash some of the power of the Phoenix. Holding the breath of Phoenix power, Mu-En began to seriously think about the usefulness of this breath and how to use it. That's right. It can be used to make that thing. Mu-En clapped her hands together and said. Chapter 104. The amazing effect of empowerment. He thought of something called empowerment, which, like amplitude crystals, could be used to strengthen armor and weapons. Although similar to amplitude crystals, the manufacturing technology of Energizer is simpler. It's not that empowerment is lower level than amplitude crystal, but because the manufacturing of empowerment and the manufacturing of empowered finished products are completely two stages. The manufacturing of empowerment requires first manufacturing the empowerment body, then injecting energy into the body and then transforming it to complete the manufacturing of a finished product. The manufacturing of the empowerment body is not difficult at all in front of the casting chamber. Although he did not master the technology to manufacture finished empowerments, he had the aura of the power of the phoenix in his hands. As long as he injected it into the empowerment, half of the empowerment would be completed. If you simply inject energy, although you cannot fully exert the effect of empowerment, you can at least use the energy in the empowerment on weapons or armor. Moreover, he can enhance the power of empowerment by constantly mastering the finished product empowerment technology until he finally manufactures a finished product empowerment. Thinking of this, Mu-En hurried to the casting cabin. In the future, he might get many different powers. If he injected all these powers into the empowerment, he would be able to use various different powers. As he operated, the casting chamber began to operate, and semicircular empowerments were produced one after another. These are all elements without any power. He can create various empowerments in the technology by mastering the empowerment technology, or he can use his own power to create empowerments that are unique to him. Picking up one of them, Mu-En circulated the void energy and injected the breath of the phoenix power into it to empower it. As soon as it was injected into the empowerment, this pure white and dim empowerment instantly lit up, flickering with a flame like light. It is worthy of being the power of the phoenix. Even if it is just a little bit of its aura, it has such power. This empowerment with the breath of phoenix power was fused into a dagger. With the infusion of void power, a flaming force was instantly released, wrapping the blade of the dagger. With a light wave at the unused materials on the ground, the dagger's flaming blade instantly cut through the materials, and even countless shattered ash particles were floating on the blade. This dagger has been wrapped in that power, giving it some of the qualities of the phoenix force. After taking out the power, Mu-En transformed into Limbo and fused the power into the armor. At the moment of fusion, he felt the amplifying effect of this empowerment on the armor. Like the dagger, Limbo now also had the characteristics of the power of the phoenix. There is a trace of phoenix power contained in the rift plane. At the moment of pushing the target into the rift plane, he can use this power to directly destroy the target. This effect greatly enhances the power of Limbo, and even makes this armor, which originally has little combat power, possess extremely strong destructive power. It's really a surprise. It seems that I need to pay more attention to various different powers in the future. Different energies can not only extract the essence of I, but also charge the empowered body in his hand, allowing him to gain completely different powers. Now it's just injected with energy. If we master the technology to make the finished product and empower it, I'm afraid we can unleash the true power of the phoenix. After releasing the empowerment fusion, Mu-En took the empowerment that was emitting red light and examined it carefully. Let's call you Phoenix Breath. After saying that, he put the Phoenix Aura into the space belt. This kind of empowerment with powerful force naturally cannot be integrated all the time. It would be fun if someone was killed accidentally. After taking back the Phoenix Aura, Mu-En turned his hand and another ball of energy appeared. This was the extra part he had kept when he extracted the essence of I from the pyramid. He was just going to study it at the time, but now he had a new idea. Inject this Cyan Pyramid energy into the empowered body to master the power of the Cyan Pyramid. His hands moved quickly, and the Cyan energy was quickly injected into the empowering body, emitting a Cyan light. Now there are two empowerments of different powers. The previous one is called Phoenix Breath, then this one will be called Pharaoh's Light. Anyway, it is obtained on the pyramid. Looking at the green Pharaoh's light in his hand, Mu-En suddenly thought of something related to the Pharaoh, the powerful armor that controls the power of the desert. How about making that battle armor? He has 21 I essences in his hands, which allows him to create 5 different battle armors. Even if he keeps 4 I essences as backup, he can still create 4 battle armors. So he doesn't have to be so cautious in his choice now. Creating the guardian god who controls the desert will not affect him. Well, it's decided to be him. In arose raging waves of the sand sea. 4 I essences slowly flew up, surrounding Mu-En and transforming into an energy cocoon to wrap him up. The light blue light directly illuminated the entire laboratory. Time passed quickly, and the energy cocoon became more and more transparent. With a cracking sound, the energy cocoon was destroyed and turned into countless energies that dissipated everywhere. At the same time, a large amount of yellow sand appeared in the laboratory, and then a warrior with his hands on his chest and a dry body appeared in the laboratory. Inaros is the desert king who rules over the desert, a war armor that can roll up and devour all life. He raised his hand and looked at his dry arm. The arm that was like yellow sand told Mu-En that the shaping was complete. Is this the patron saint of the desert and the power of life, the ruler of the desert, Inaros? How terrifying! He could clearly feel the ground beneath his feet turning into yellow sand, and some insect-like creatures in the sand were also having their life energy drained by the armor. If he doesn't restrain this power, it won't be long before this laboratory turns into yellow sand and spreads to other rooms in the academy. After gathering the power of Inaros' raging sand sea, Mu-En integrated the pharaoh's light into his armor. Hum with a buzzing sound, the energy lights all over his body turned from sandy yellow to green, and the blazing power continued to surge out from the armor, as if to turn everything around into a dry desert. This is incredible. I didn't expect that the light of the pharaoh would have such power, and Mu-En touched the energy lamp on his forehead, and it seemed that there was energy trying to emit from here. Looking at the materials on the ground, Mu-En activated the energy lamp on his forehead, and a green ray shot out from it, passing across the materials. The scorching energy rays melted the material on the ground and split it in two. Such a change shocked Mu-En. This kind of attack ability was not possessed by Inaros' raging sand sea itself, but was bestowed upon the armor by the light of the pharaoh. Not only does it allow the armor to emit high temperatures to dry out the surroundings, it also gives the armor new attack capabilities. Chapter 105, The Ladies and the Monks. The strengthening of the armor by the light of the pharaoh gave Mu-En an unexpected surprise. Perhaps these empowerments infused with special energy by him could exert even more powerful power after they were fully completed. After cancelling the transformation of the armor, Mu-En began to consider the shaping of other armors. Inaros' raging waves of the sand sea had already been shaped by him. This armor can extract vitality and control the desert, which can have unexpected effects in some battles. What should we shape next? Now his armor has the powerful attacking Excalibur Holy Sword and half of the powerful defensive Inaros' raging sand sea. Next, he can consider the choice of range armor. There are many armors with large-scale attacks, so he must consider carefully when choosing. Some armors can control lightning and release large-scale electric shocks, some armors can release molten crystals, which can not only defend but also launch violent attacks on surrounding enemies, and some armors are a hotbed of poison, whose toxins will continue to spread and corrode everything around them. Of course, there are other armors with large-scale attacks, but compared to these armors, they are still a little weak. Which one should I choose? Mu-En was a little hesitant. For a moment, he couldn't decide what kind of armor he wanted to create. After pondering for a long time, Mu-En came back to his senses after someone knocked on the laboratory door. Dong dong dong! Who would look for him at this time? The students should be in class at this time, and Charles and others are giving lectures to the students, so they should not come to see me. Opening the door of the laboratory, a little girl appeared in front of him. Nina. Mu-En was really surprised at the little girl who appeared in front of him, because this little girl had never been here before. Uncle Mu-En, my little rabbit is injured, can you bandage it? Nina held up the brown rabbit in her hand and waited for Mu-En's answer. Bandaging a rabbit's wound. After searching around the laboratory, I finally found an emergency medicine kit in a drawer in the corner. This was probably something Charles had specially equipped for every room in the academy. He took out gauze and alcohol cotton and asked Nina while treating the rabbit's wound. What is your greatest wish? Hearing Mu-En's question, Nina looked up, thought for a while, and looked at Mu-En. I hope all the little animals can live happily. They are miserable. There are always hunters in the forest near my home who are targeting those cute little deer. Let the life around you survive? A few armors appeared in Mu-En's mind inexplicably. These armors did not have large-scale attacks, but they all possessed special powers. Some use energy to protect people within a certain range from harm, some restore the injuries and energy of surrounding lives by draining the life of the enemy, and some can even play with souls at will. Uncle Mu-En, you're almost tangling the little rabbit into a ball of yarn. Nina's voice rang in his ears, and Mu-En looked over suddenly. The rabbit was wrapped in gauze all over and looked like a rabbit mummy. Haha, unexpected. After giving Nina an awkward smile, Mu-En immediately untied the gauze and re-bandaged the rabbit. This time he didn't get distracted and quickly bandaged the rabbit's wound. There you go, little bunny. He handed the rabbit to Nina, gently rubbed her head, and watched the little girl leave. The armor he had just thought of seemed to be worth considering. After all, some functional armor was still very useful. After pondering for a while in the laboratory, he finally decided what kind of armor would be most suitable. For the armor with area attack, he chose Gara Glass Maiden, an armor that controls crystal glass and can crush all enemies that stand in her way. This armor has both offensive and defensive capabilities, and glass is her weapon. Not only can it attack the enemy, but it can also trap the enemy and even defend against the enemy's attacks. After determining the target to be shaped, Mu-En immediately began to shape the armor. Just like the previous shaping method, Mu-En was once again wrapped in the energy cocoon transformed from ice essence. As the energy cocoon broke, a pleasant sound rang out from it. Ding ding ding! Accompanied by the sound of ding dong, Mu-En, who had transformed into Gara Glass Maid, slowly walked out. Her whole body was covered with crystal clear glass armor, especially behind her, where there was a glass cloak falling from her shoulders. Although it looks frail, its strength is indeed not weak. Gara Glass Maid is very powerful. Although it seems to use very fragile glass, the power she bursts out is not comparable to ordinary glass. Ring ring ring! With a pleasant sound, a glazed sword appeared in Mu-En's hand. He swung it violently at the materials piled on the ground, and those materials were directly cut and separated. Although this glazed sword looks no different from ordinary glass, its destructive power is something that ordinary glass cannot achieve. If it was ordinary glass, what shattered just now should be the glass sword. The hand holding the glazed long sword shook slightly, and the long sword instantly turned into countless fragments, which were combined with the glass decoration on the battle armor. Ha! This is also a resource-saving armor. Mu-En laughed loudly. He was very satisfied with the armor. As for the other abilities of the armor, he would try them when he had time. Next, it was time to consider the second battle armor. This time he was very straightforward and directly chose the battle armor that could protect the surroundings, Hero Exorcist who practiced like an ascetic monk. Although this armor has little offensive ability, it has extremely strong effects in other aspects. For example, the Covenant of Protection releases energy to provide protection for the surroundings. If this armor is used in the battle with Apocalypse, the Covenant of Protection can allow him to ignore and absorb the damage of the terrifying high-temperature light column and convert it into a powerful force that increases his own strength. Speaking of which, Hero the Exorcist seems to be a good opponent against the Void. I don't know if this counts as fighting against yourself. After saying this mockingly, Mu-En started to shape it directly. He has a special feeling for this armor. When he was working on the task of making this armor, he was frightened by the terrifying atmosphere in it, and it took him a lot of effort to make the armor. Soon, as the energy cocoon was broken, a man in red armor appeared in the laboratory. This is Hero the Exorcist. He looks like a pious priest, wearing a red robe and standing tall. Taking out the incinerator that was like a flail from his waist, Mu-En waved it in front of him. The weight of the incinerator is not bad. If I have a shield, maybe I can choose to become a priest. After saying this, he couldn't help laughing. Which pastor would be like him, holding an incinerator like a flail in his hand? Chapter 106. The Power of the Lord of Dust. Hero's attack ability is very weak, even less destructive than Limbo's. His way of fighting against the Void was to release the chains and block the Void out. But this is not a big deal for Mu-En, after all, he has plenty of means of attack. Having completed the shaping of 2 battle armors, now there is only the last one left to consider. The distribution of the battle armors in his hands is pretty good. This last piece of armor requires serious consideration. For functional armors, he has Hero Exorcist and Limbo Spiritual Prison. For area attacks, he has Gara Glass Lady. For flying, he has Titania Fantasy Butterfly Fairy. For attack, he has Zaka Void Rumble and Excalibur Holy Sword, and Inaros Sand Sea Rage, which is considered a half-defense armor. Now he should consider some other aspects and make his combat system more perfect. Everything else is pretty good, but the strength aspect seems to be a little lacking. After thinking about all the armor, Mu-En found that the power of his own armor seemed to be a little weaker. Although the existence of the glorious sword allows him to face many enemies, his strength still needs to be improved. After all, the glorious sword is not applicable at all times. There are not many armors that specialize in strength, and 2 of them appeared in Mu-En's mind. One is Atlas Heaven Shaker, known as the Stone Titan, and the other is Rhino Wild Rhino, a heavy armored warrior who is clad in iron armor and rampages around like a rhinoceros. Both of these battle armors are powerful strength-type battle armors, and each has its own advantages. In the game, Atlas Sky's hacker is given the title of One Punch Man, and this title is enough to prove how strong his power is. Rhino can use its powerful strength to vibrate the surrounding environment and greatly slow down the movement of surrounding particles, thus achieving a situation where time seems to have stopped. The two armors target different directions and cause different effects. The power of Atlas Sky's hacker focuses on attack, while the power of Wild Rhino focuses on defense. Then let's build Atlas Heaven Shaker. This armor has pretty good defensive capabilities anyway, and the feeling of hitting flesh with fists should be very pleasant. After deciding on the armor he wanted, Muen began to shape the last armor. As a power-type armor, Atlas Sky's hacker is the Lord of Rock and Dust and controls the power of the earth. When he is at his most powerful, he can even shake the sky and reshape the earth. As time passed, the brighter energy cocoon suddenly broke open, and a muscular battle armor appeared. However, at first glance, this battle armor looked like it had no head. Isn't Atlas Trapezius a little too big? People who don't know would think this armor has no head. The power of Atlas Sky's hacker is very obvious. The trapezius muscle that can turn the head into a neck deeply proves that this is a powerful armor. However, Muen didn't care too much about it. After all, what he needed was the power of the armor. As long as the external appearance was not too outrageous, he could still accept it. Of course, he also deeply felt the powerful force of this armor. As long as he stood on the ground, there would be endless power flowing out of it, and no one could knock him down. Moreover, Muen can feel the power of the earth, as if he is a part of the earth, and he can use the earth to attack the enemy. Even the ground that was previously turned into sand by Inarosa's raging sand sea is now gradually turning into hard rock. He clenched his hands suddenly, and a powerful force burst out instantly, and the whole laboratory shook under this force. What a powerful force, it's worthy of being Atlas Heaven Shaker. He marveled at the powerful strength of the armor in the laboratory, while in other places in the academy, people were frightened by the powerful force. Everyone looked up at the lights on the roof. The lights were swaying, making them think that there was an earthquake. In the classroom, students were talking and teachers were shouting. Anjing, don't worry about your safety in the academy. Even if an earthquake really happens, we can protect you. Listening to the teachers' voices, the students gradually calmed down. They knew that what the teachers said was right, and they themselves had mutant abilities, so even if an earthquake really occurred, they would not be harmed. After comforting the students, all the teachers heard Charles's mental call. It turned out that Charles was also startled by the sudden vibration, and he had to ask what was going on. In Charles's office, Raven and others walked in and all looked at Charles, who was sitting in a wheelchair. Did you all feel the vibration just now? Yes. Everyone nodded, and Raven said solemnly, the vibration is very unusual. It should not be caused by an earthquake. If it is an earthquake, it will not just happen for a moment, but will last for a period of time. Charles nodded. This was also what he guessed in his mind, but who could have caused this vibration? I think Muen might know something. Eric spoke up and said that he had completely settled down in the academy and chose to become a teacher here to teach the little mutants from all over the world. Just now, when he saw his daughter's rabbit being bandaged with gauze, he casually asked, and it was Muen who helped her bandage it. This surprised him a little. Muen had been staying in the room he had converted into a laboratory since he came back. Now he might have completed some research, so he walked out of the laboratory to help Nina bandage the rabbit. Perhaps the vibration just now was caused by Muen's experiment on the finished product. When everyone heard Eric mention Muen, they all turned their attention to him. Perhaps the vibration was really related to Muen. Go and have a look, maybe you'll gain something. Everyone walked towards Muen's laboratory, and Muen had already completed the strengthening of several newly made battle armors and was ready to relax for a while. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Charles and others coming to the door. Hey, you guys aren't in class, why are you here? It's class time now. Why are these people all coming to him instead of educating those little mutants? We have something to ask you. Charles smiled and tilted his head to look inside the laboratory. Wouldn't you like us to go in and take a look? They were all very curious about what Muen had been doing these days and whether the vibration just now was related to Muen. Seeing that everyone was so curious, Muen did not refuse. After all, there were only 2 casting chambers, and it was not something shameful. Ha, come in. Chapter 107. Charles's new chair. When we walked into the laboratory, everyone was shocked by the two casting chambers in the room. Most people were just extremely surprised that Moon had made these two machines in the past few days, but Hank, who was proficient in science and technology, was completely obsessed with these two casting cabins. "Is this what you made these days?" Hank gently stroked it while lying on the first-generation casting cabin. "Oh my god, it's so beautiful. This is a technology that is beyond the current era. The technological level of the casting cabin is very high, and even the first generation has powerful technology that surpasses the current era." Carefully observing every structure of the casting chamber, Hank looked at Moon eagerly. "What is this used for? And why do I feel like these two machines are not much different?" "Indeed, it is almost the same, because my machine is an upgraded version of yours." Patting the second-generation casting cabin beside him, Muen explained with a smile, "This thing is called a casting cabin. You can think of it as a semi-intelligent industrial manufacturing device. As long as you upload the designed blueprint to the casting cabin, it can manufacture the things in the blueprint. Of course, you can also operate it independently and customize your own props." After hearing Moon's explanation, Hank's eyes lit up and he couldn't wait to try out this casting chamber. "Can I try?" "Of course, I'm not planning to take the first-generation foundry cabin with me. I'll just leave it as equipment for the academy." Muen nodded. The size of the first-generation casting chamber was really too large. More than half of the entire room was occupied by the casting chamber. Naturally, he would not care about such a large and bulky machine. However, he will take the second-generation casting cabin with him. After all, the second-generation casting cabin is deformable. Although it looks a bit large now, after being folded, its volume is only 1 cubic meter, which is just enough to store a smart module. In this way, he can manufacture items anytime and anywhere, and avoid having to build a casting cabin from scratch when he needs to manufacture something. Hank was delighted to hear Moon's words. He hurried to the first-generation casting cabin and started up this device full of technological beauty. As for the items to be manufactured, he already had an idea in mind. He was planning to manufacture a brainwave enhancer, as the previous one had been destroyed by Alex. During the time he came back, he had been rebuilding the brainwave amplification room and had not made the brainwave enhancer. Now he could take this opportunity to make Charles's brainwave enhancer. Hank added materials into the casting chamber and started making things carefully. The others did not disturb him but just looked at him quietly, waiting for the items to be made by Hank. As time went on, a chair-like object appeared in the casting chamber, which Hank made specifically for Charles. He combined the brainwave enhancer with the hover chair to create the current freestyle brainwave enhancer. Now, as long as Charles sits on it, he can use the brainwave enhancer to use his psychic abilities. Of course, if he enters the brainwave amplification room, Charles can cover the entire Earth with his psychic abilities. Seeing that the device he made had appeared, Hank picked up the chair and looked at Charles in surprise. "You don't have to sit in a wheelchair this time. I made this one especially for you." As he spoke, he activated the hover chair, the light on the chair lit up, and then it floated in the air. "Try it quickly." As soon as he finished speaking, Eric raised his hand and waved it. The magnetic force manipulated some metal pieces and took Charles to the hover chair. Sitting in this chair, Charles unexpectedly discovered that his telepathy to the surroundings had become much stronger, which surprised him very much. And when Hank saw his expression, he couldn't help but laugh. It contains some brainwave enhancement technology. In addition to increasing your abilities, it can also allow the chair to move freely according to your thoughts. "Thank you, Hank, and of course you, Moon." Charles was very satisfied with the hover chair, and he also understood that it was thanks to Moon's casting cabin. If Hank had made it alone, the chair would have taken a long time to be made. "Nothing. By the way, what do you want to see me for?" After hearing Muen's question, everyone realized that they did not come to Muen to visit the laboratory. There was an unusual vibration in the academy just now. "We want to ask you if you know anything." The vibration just now, these words reminded Muen of the vibration caused by his clenched fist when he transformed into Atlas Heaven Shaker just now. At that time, he just felt that the power was very strong, but he did not expect that the entire academy would feel that vibration. "I do know, because I was the one who caused the vibration. There's nothing to hide, and it's not like anything big happened." After hearing Muen's answer, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. As long as they knew the source of the vibration, it would be fine. After feeling relieved, Charles looked at Mu-En again. You've always said that our fighting skills are poor. Now that you're back, why don't you take this opportunity to teach the kids? Their fighting skills are already fixed, and no matter how much they practice, they can't improve much. People like Scott or Jean have not yet formed their fighting skills. Under Moon's guidance, they will be able to use their respective abilities to fight freely. Especially for Scott, even though he has glasses to help him control his abilities, what if the glasses break? Or if they fall off, in this situation, what should he do? Should you just recklessly release beams to attack indiscriminately, or should you train more and be prepared for such situations so that you can still freely exert your power even if you lose your glasses? Of course, just like in the past, it's paid. Charles said with a smile. Moon thought about Charles's suggestion for a while and then agreed. It's not for the reward Charles mentioned. For him now, money is no longer important. He just wanted to take a short break, and being a teacher would be a good choice during this time. What's more, the fighting ability of the students in the academy is really poor. The only thing that makes them stronger than ordinary people is that they possess some mutant abilities. If they fight with ordinary people without using their mutant powers, it is hard to say who will win or lose. I hope the students won't complain to you. Mu-En smiled and raised his eyebrows. Of course, as long as you don't use the same training method you used on Riven and the others, the kids can still hold on. Charles also smiled in response. He knew how effective Moon's training was. As long as the children hold on, they can easily deal with the troubles around them even without using their mutant powers. This is perfect for the situation of mutants. After all, fighting with ordinary people is better than using mutant powers to hurt others. Of course, it would be even better if the children didn't fight. Well, it's a good wish from a bald professor with paralyzed lower body. Chapter 108. The Suffering Students. The students of Xavier's School for Gifted People have been suffering recently as they have a new combat teacher. No one knew what the other party was using, but as soon as they entered the training ground, their abilities would become ineffective. What was waiting for them in the training ground was a torturous training. Who could have imagined that a teacher would ask these students who had never had any rock climbing experience to climb to the more than 10-meter high platform in the center of the training ground with their bare hands within 30 minutes? Although there were many places on the platform for them to hold on to, they were all too small and unsafe. If they didn't hold on to some of them tightly, they would slip and fall. If they hadn't been tied with safety ropes, a large number of them would have been killed by now. Even so, some of them were still sore all over. Moreover, the teacher only gave them 1 hour, and if they failed to reach the summit, they would face devilish training. As it stands, they have all been wiped out and none of them have completed the climb. On the contrary, they have gone through a lot of devilish training, which makes them exhausted every day. After training every day, they return to the dormitory and fall asleep immediately. They don't have the energy to play around. As the days passed, their bodies became stronger and they were gradually able to complete the task of climbing the platform. Although some people still cannot complete it within the specified time, at least everyone can now climb to the top of the platform. As their teacher, Mu-En would not let these students go easily. Their physical fitness had only improved now, and they were still a group of rookies in combat. One day, after everyone reached the summit within the stipulated time, Mu-En clapped his hands and said loudly, "Congratulations on completing the first phase of training." Yet, after hearing the news, the students couldn't help but cheer. They could finally stop going through these devilish trainings. But someone soon realized that Mu-En was talking about the end of the first phase of training. Could there be other phases of training? They began to feel uneasy and kept praying that the things they speculated would not happen. Very good, it seems everyone is in high spirits, so the second phase of training will begin now. Mu-En's voice echoed in the training ground, and all the students' faces fell. After all, they could not escape the clutches of their teacher. The first phase of training has improved your physical fitness. This second phase of training will train your combat skills. As Mu-En said this, he smiled, which made all the students shudder. In other words, what you have to do next is to practice the fighting skills I taught you until you pass my test. After saying that, he took a stance and asked the students to practice with him. What he taught was an attack style called Shocking Punch, a methodical fighting technique that was very suitable for these little mutants. Many students were also learning in an earnest manner. Compared to the previous training, now it was just practicing boxing, which was much easier. But they didn't know that this was just the beginning of a nightmare. Although the shock punch's attack method was methodical, it was used for fighting after all. And the best way to improve their fighting skills was to fight against each other. This gave the students a headache. They fought against each other in pairs in the field where their abilities were blocked, using the same moves and attacking back and forth as if in a turn-based system. Their clumsy attacks delighted Muinal. It was the first time he had seen such a fight. When one person attacks, the other person stands there and waits, and only after being punched does he punch back. Not to mention Muin, even Charles and the others couldn't help laughing after seeing such a battle. The children's behavior was too childish, and in their eyes it looked like they were just playing. However, as the students mastered these moves more and more, their mastery of fighting skills gradually improved, and they could already use fighting skills to fight their opponents. Even if they were opponents who used the same moves as themselves, they could use different moves to deal with them flexibly, but they didn't understand why the professor wanted them to master this fighting skill. That day, Moon brought the students to the lawn outside the college. All the people in the college gathered there. Even Logan, who was hiding in his room enjoying a cigar, was called over by Charles. "You have already mastered the shock punch very well, and all you have to do now is practice it often. However, before you graduate, you still need to have one last battle. Your opponents are the teachers in the academy, including me if you want." Hearing this, many students twitched their lips. They would never choose to fight against Muin. During training, they had fought with Muin more than once, but they all failed without exception. Even with so many of them together, they were no match for Muin and were all beaten up by him. Fighting alone now, even if they can use their mutant powers, they are probably no match for the teacher. The fight soon began. The well-mannered Hank came to the lawn, and in front of him was a boy who was about the same height as him. "Come on, let me see the results of your training." Hank smiled and punched. "Okay, Mr. Hank." The boy nodded and made a punching gesture. The boy took light steps and punched Hank. He wanted to prove his strength to his teacher and professor. Punch after punch was launched at Hank, causing him to nod his head repeatedly in defense. If it was a normal person, he would have been knocked down by those previous punches. "Well done, remember to practice more often." After making an evaluation of the boys, Hank and the students left the field, allowing Eric, the teacher, to come on stage and fight against the students. One by one, the students continued to compete with the teachers and received unanimous praise from several teachers. Thump halfway through the battle between the student and the teacher, a muffled sound was heard from outside the academy, followed by a shaking ground. "Chin, take the students back. Everyone else, be careful and alert." Noticing the abnormal situation, Charles immediately gave orders to everyone. He sensed that a malicious force was approaching. "Charles!" With a loud shout, a giant nearly 3 meters tall and wearing a heavy iron helmet fell heavily from the air. Boom! The ground was shaking the moment he landed, and his sturdy body made everyone stunned. "Who is this giant? Charles, come out!" The giant shouted to the academy. "Charles, do you have a grudge against this big guy?" Everyone looked at Charles on the hover chair. They had never seen this giant before. Charles also frowned. He felt very strange. When did he provoke such a giant? "Come out!" The giant punched the ground hard, and the originally flat ground was shattered in an instant, spreading outwards like a wave. Tisk tisk, this person is not friendly. Chapter 109, Fighting the Red Tank. As he spoke, Muin was surrounded by void energy and transformed into Atlas Heaven Shaker. He knew who the person in front of him was. No one else could be dressed like him except Red Tank. Especially the heavy helmet on Red Tank's head, which was specially made to guard against Charles's psychic abilities. It is precisely because he knows who the other party is that Muin transforms into Atlas Heaven Shaker. This big guy possesses extremely strong power, and it is a good opportunity for him to try out the power of Atlas Heaven Shaker. At the moment of transformation, Muin rushed towards the Red Tank. Landslide with explosive force, he punched the Red Tank. The powerful force even caused the flow of air, severely hitting the Red Tank. Facing Muin's attack, Red Tank also fought back with his fists, and his strong arms swung out violently and collided with Muin's fists. Boom! A visible impact spread out between the two people, and the ground was torn apart in an instant, like cracked soil. "You are not Charles. Charles does not have this kind of power." The repelled Red Tank shouted and punched Muin again. The strength of this headless guy was almost the same as his own. This was the first opponent he met who could compete with him after gaining such power. Muen was also shocked by the power of Red Tank. Although he knew that Red Tank was incredibly powerful, he did not expect that the enhanced Atlas Heaven Shaker would not be able to subdue him so easily. Boom! 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 The two men's fists kept hitting out, and strong impacts appeared between them that continued to spread. The strong and powerful Red Tank was beaten back again and again in the face of Muen's ever-increasing powerful strength. Finally, after Muen threw a fierce punch, the Red Tank was finally blown away. Oh, this power is really strong. Red Tank was really strong. In the first few punches, he was unable to do anything to the opponent, which shocked him. As he was sighing, he felt the ground shaking wildly, and the Red Tank that was blown away rushed towards him like a car at high speed. Dong dong dong! Looking at the approaching Red Tank, Muen stomped his feet lightly, and a stone wall made of a large amount of rocks blocked his way. Earth construct ion. As soon as the stone wall was formed, the Red Tank rushed towards it. Boom! The stone wall did not stop the Red Tank's charge and was directly smashed to pieces. He rushed towards Muen with an unstoppable momentum. Seeing that the stone wall could not stop the momentum of the Red Tank, Muen had to change his strategy and a beam of light was released from his eyes. Petrified gaze. The light beam directly hit the reunited Red Tank, and countless broken stone skins appeared on his body, which only slowed down his speed. He still continued to charge towards Muen. When he was charging, nothing could stop him. Seeing that the petrifying gaze had no effect on the Red Tank, Muen simply swung his fist towards the Red Tank. As Muen attacked the Red Tank, the broken rocks around him gathered towards him. Pieces of hard rock attached to the surface of Atlas Heaven Shaker's body, and even Muen's fist was covered with a layer of hard rock. Boom! The two men collided again, and the unstoppable Red Tank met his opponent for the first time. His charge was unable to knock down the man in front of him. Although the opponent was knocked far away by him, he was still standing on the ground. Muen was also shocked by the power accumulated by the Red Tank during the charge. Although the punch he threw greatly slowed down the opponent's charge speed, it still failed to block the opponent's attack. If the ground beneath his feet had not shared the attack of the Red Tanks with him, he would not be plowing 2 furrows in the ground with his legs like he is now. Isn't Red Tank's power a bit too strong? The power displayed by Red Tank was much stronger than the previously corrupted Black Knight, which made him feel a little emotional. At this moment, Charles seemed to remember the true identity of Red Tank from the voice. "You are, Kane." Although his voice was not very loud, it was clearly heard by Red Tank. Red Tank, who was about to continue fighting with Moon, slowly turned around and looked at Charles, who was sitting on the hover chair. "Bald, why do you know my name?" In Red Tank's memory, Charles still had that thick head of hair. He didn't realize that the bald man in front of him was the Charles he was looking for. "I am the person you are looking for, your brother Charles, but why have you become like this?" Charles answered truthfully that although the other party had no blood relationship with him, he was his brother in name after all. The most important thing is that his brother is an ordinary person and has no mutant abilities at all. How could he become like this? Not only has he become a giant, but he also has such great power. But Red Tank didn't believe it at all. He looked at Charles and snorted coldly. "You are lying. Charles is not bald, and he is not disabled." Although he held a grudge against his brother, he did not think anyone else was qualified to impersonate Charles, especially such a clumsy disabled imitator. If this was really the case with Charles, then his childhood would not have been so miserable. After all, Charles is an excellent person in all aspects. Seeing that Red Tank didn't believe him, Charles was helpless. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, and he had changed a lot now, so it was understandable that the other party didn't recognize him. "He is indeed Charles, but what are you looking for him for? Bullying a disabled person who has lost his hair." As Moon spoke, he walked over, and hard rocks surrounded his body, turning him into a stone man. Hearing what the fighter who fought back and forth with him said so, Red Tank knelt down and looked at Charles. "If you look closely, you do look a bit like Charles." As he spoke, he took out a yellowed photo from his arms and compared the teenage boy and Charles in the photo. "Could it be that you are really Charles?" There was disbelief in his tone. He had been thinking day and night about proving that he was stronger than Charles. Now that he had obtained this powerful strength, the other party had become paralyzed and sat in a wheelchair. Even his brown hair had disappeared, leaving only a bright bald head that could reflect the sunlight. For a moment, he felt very lost, and all the resentment in his heart now turned into pity. The opponent was a weak disabled person. Even though his mental abilities were not affected, it did not inspire the slightest desire to fight in him. Even if he was stronger than Charles now, what would that matter? Was he going to prove that he was stronger than a disabled person? What he wanted was a stronger Charles than the one in his heart, not the Charles in front of him who could only move by relying on a hover chair. Charles, you are no longer qualified to be my target. He then looked at Muen, and you, Stone Man, you have become my opponent. I will prove that I am stronger than anyone else. Chapter 110. Leaving. After saying that, he stomped his feet hard and rushed towards Muen. Muen also rushed forward, swinging his stone fist at the red tank, and the two began fighting again. This time, both of them were immersed in the battle. Although Muen mastered many combat skills, Red Tank had also been on the battlefield and his combat ability was also very good. The two powerful guys kept colliding and hitting each other violently, destroying everything around them and turning the lawn into loose soil. The rocks on Muen's body continued to shatter under the attack of the communist tanks, and under his feet, more hard rocks were gathering towards her and constantly merging into his body. Red Tank is in a much more miserable situation. He doesn't have the power of Atlas Heaven Shaker to pull the surrounding rocks. He can only use his own body to resist. Although his body could withstand Muen's punches, his clothes could not. Under Muen's crazy attack and the damage caused by the flying debris, his clothes had already been torn into tatters and looked completely unrecognizable. Thump! The two men's fists collided again, and the red tank was blown far away. This time, the red tank did not rush over again. He got up from the ground and looked at Muen, who was covered by stones. You win this time, but next time we meet, I will definitely defeat you. As soon as he finished speaking, Red Tank turned and rushed away. He wanted to continue to increase his strength until he defeated Muen. Watching Red Tank leave, everyone had a new understanding of the power of Red Tank and Muen. If it weren't for Muen, even if they could subdue Red Tank, it would take a lot of effort. However, the academy is now in a mess. This was caused by the battle between Muen and the Red Tank. Now it will take a lot of effort to level the ground. Everyone looked at the rolling mud on the ground in front of them and felt a little worried. Muen was released from Atlas transformation into Heaven Shaker, and there was some crimson energy in his hands. This was the power he absorbed from Red Tank when he was fighting with him. He knew something about Red Tank's power. This power came from a super strong man. If I remember correctly, Ancient One also seems to have a spell related to that powerful man. He still knew some of Kamar-Taj's spells, such as the Mirror Space, the Book of Vishanti of White Magic, or the power from the Crimson Universe. I'll go to the Avengers world and ask Ancient One in a few days. She should be able to give me the answer. He had been relaxing for a long time, and now he was on his way to continue collecting the essence of I, and he also had to find out about the problem of the Void Rift. As for whether the Red Tank will be found again, what does that have to do with him? Is it possible that he still has to wait for the Red Tank to come back to challenge him? He's not a sparring partner, why is he waiting for this guy? After putting away the crimson energy of the Red Tank, Muen turned to look at everyone. It's all over now. The students can now continue with their final examinations. As he spoke, one of his feet turned into armor, and then the surrounding ground began to roll and heal madly, and soon turned into a bare, flat ground. Seeing that Muen had restored the ground, everyone nodded without saying anything. Although there was the Red Tank episode, it's over now after all. Apart from making a mess around here with Muen, Red Tank didn't have any impact on anything. This bare ground can be planted with lawn later. The assessment started again, and the students fought with the teacher again, but this time, the students understood why they had to master fighting skills. They have seen the battle between Muen and the Red Tank just now. Both of them have very strong fighting skills. Even if they don't have that kind of strength, they are not opponents. The students who have experienced Charles's teaching all understand what Charles expects. Although the peaceful relationship between mutants and humans has been maintained for a long time, most people are still afraid of mutants. Compared with using mutant abilities, this seemingly ordinary fighting skill can allow them to integrate into the human world more quickly without being rejected by humans. After all, mastering mutant abilities is different from mastering superb fighting skills. A few days later, Muen packed up all his things and said goodbye to everyone. I have to go, I have some things to deal with, I hope I can see you again when I come back. He waved to everyone, and was surrounded by void energy, transforming into limbo. A void crack opened behind him and he walked in. After completely entering the void, Mu-En suddenly stuck his head out and looked at everyone again. I have a gift for you in my room. I think you will like it. After saying that, he closed the void rift and completely disappeared from everyone's sight. But Charles and the others looked at each other, all wanting to know what Mu-En had left behind. As for where Mu-En went, they did not try to find out too much. One day they would know. In fact, what Mu-En left behind were some modules to enhance everyone's abilities. As long as they were equipped and connected to energy, their abilities could be amplified and enhanced. Although the amplitude is not very strong, it is a means to amplify their strength after all. In the void, Mu-En did not go to any strange world again. He found the Avengers world recorded in Limbo, opened the passage and walked in. He had to talk to Ancient One about the origin of the power that he injected into his empowerment and named it the Crimson Power. Back in the Avengers world, he was standing in front of the Statue of Liberty, looking at everything around him. New York has changed a lot. When he left, although New York was also an international metropolis, it was not as prosperous as it is today. New York has obviously become more prosperous now. Not to mention other things, even the vehicles driving on the roadside are much more advanced than in the past. This is the era I'm familiar with. Looking at the surrounding environment, Mu-En laughed. The time he traveled through was really too early. This time he finally returned to the era he was most familiar with. Instead of rushing to Carmitage, he walked slowly on the road, looking around at everything in New York. The news broadcast on the huge screens on some buildings caught his attention. Did this kid Tony just finish fighting with Whiplash? The news was about the reorganization of Hammer Industries. As a military enterprise, the Iron Man suits manufactured by Hammer Industries went out of control at the press conference and launched attacks on all walks of life. This caused the boss of Hammer Industries to be sent directly to prison. As for the company, it was divided up by other companies, most of which were swallowed up by Stark Industries. Of course, what Stark Industries swallowed up were the fixed industries of Hammer Industries, while the military industries were acquired by several arms companies. Haha, it looks like he's been doing pretty well these years. Looking at Tony on the screen, Moon laughed. I just wonder what his expression will be when he sees Howard and Maria. After all, both of them have passed away. Chapter 111. Familiar Times. After walking on the street for a while, in a deserted alley, Mu-En transformed into Titania the fantasy butterfly fairy and flew towards Stark Tower. I haven't seen Tony for a long time, so I'll take this opportunity to go see that guy. And, look, there are butterflies. A boy on the street saw a group of butterflies flying in the sky. The beautiful blue color made him scream in surprise. The pedestrians around looked up at the butterfly flying in the air. Soon, Mu-En arrived at Stark Tower. After changing back to his own appearance, he followed a group of visitors into Stark Tower. The building still looks the same, but now there are no weapons displayed on the stands as in the past. Instead, there are various energy models. After the restructuring of Stark Industries, its main business is now energy, and these energy models are the energy used by generations. From the initial wood to coal and electricity, to oil and natural gas, and the use of nuclear energy. There is a detailed introduction at each booth. These booths are getting bigger and bigger with the development of the times. However, when it comes to nuclear energy, some special changes have occurred. There are currently known thermonuclear uses, as well as the cold nuclear technology that Stark Industries has specifically introduced. There is even a one-to-one wax model of the Iron Man suit and Tony. I have to say, this guy is still as showy as ever. Leaving the exhibition area, Moon walked towards other parts of Stark Building. His movements everywhere attracted the attention of the security personnel in the building, as they had never seen any identity tags on Mu-En. Sir, no visitors are allowed here. The security guard stepped forward and said. Hee, I know. Where is Tony Stark's bodyguard Happy? When they heard Mu-En asking about Happy, several security guards looked at each other. They were very familiar with who Happy was. He was the security director of Stark Industries, their immediate superior, and the personal bodyguard of the boss of Stark Industries. Director Happy is in the office. Do you want me to notify him? A security guard asked. He was not sure about Mu-En's background. Could he be the person that Supervisor Happy had made an appointment with? Have you become a supervisor? Then let's get in touch. After Mu-En nodded in agreement, the security guard hurriedly called Happy's office. At this moment, Happy was sitting in the office, carefully examining the floor plan of Stark Tower. Previously, in order to help Tony release the control of those steel machines, he and Pepper's secretary Natalie broke into Hammer Industries. It was at that time that he began to doubt his own skills and the combat effectiveness of the security personnel. So many of them were not even as good as a woman. It was from then on that he began to worry about ordinary security personnel. If there were a few more people like Natalie, Stark Tower would become a department store where people could come and go freely. Ding 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 ding, this is the security department, I'm Happy, the security supervisor. Manager Happy, we found someone on the floor. He looks like your guest. A voice came from the other end of the line. Guest? How could I have any guests, especially in Stark Tower? Just then, a familiar voice came from the other end of the phone. Happy, is Tony there? This sound. A figure who had disappeared for more than 10 years quickly emerged in Happy's mind, the man whom he regarded as an idol, although he hated him during the dart game. You are, Mr. Moon. Well, what's the problem? According to the news outside, Tony has done some big things with the handicap assistive device recently. It was still a familiar tone, and Happy's eyes twitched. Only Moon and Tony could have thought of describing such a powerful iron armor as a medical auxiliary device. Indeed, but the boss still wins as always. I'll ask them to take you up now. No need, I'll go up by myself. After saying that, Muen returned the phone to the security guard and turned around to get on the elevator. Soon, he arrived at the top floor of Stark Tower, and Happy was standing in front of the elevator door waiting. As soon as he stepped out of the elevator, Muen was surprised by Happy's figure. Haven't you been exercising in these years? I remember that when I last saw you, you were still quite strong. How come now? Happy is no longer the muscular Happy he used to be. Now he looks fat and fair, and his body shape is nothing like what a personal bodyguard should have. Oh, no, with a body like this, he can serve as a human shield for Tony. He just needs to hide behind him. Haha, I haven't been very good at managing my body recently, but I still have my professional qualities. Happy responded familiarly, walking on the top floor with Moon with a smile on his face, heading towards Tony's own laboratory. As soon as I arrived at the laboratory, I saw a woman with a ponytail walking out. Happy? Are you here to train with Tony? And who is this? Pepper looked at Moon with curiosity. She had a good memory and knew that she had never seen Moon from her first day at Stark Industries to now. This is a shareholder of Stark Industries. He hasn't been back for more than 10 years. Haven't been back for more than 10 years? No wonder. The other party had already left before she arrived, no wonder she didn't recognize him. Hello sir, my name is Virginia Pepper Potts, you can just call me Pepper. Hello Pepper, call me Moon. Muen responded with a smile, and the three of them walked into Tony's laboratory together. It would be better to call this a large entertainment venue rather than a laboratory. Apart from a few robotic arms, there is no experimental equipment here. Instead, there are mostly drinks at the bar. He looked at Happy with a slightly raised eyebrow, and Happy was also smiling awkwardly. This really didn't look like a laboratory. When he entered the laboratory, a boxing platform came into view. Next to the boxing platform, Tony was sitting in a chair, sweating all over, replenishing water. Hey, the original homeless man, is he going to evolve into a mechanical man now? These words, with a slightly mocking tone, made Tony ready to spit back. But after seeing Muen's face, he froze in place, and the cup in his hand fell to the ground. Why are you back, you bastard? The words came out of her mouth, causing Happy and Pepper to cover their mouths and laugh. You don't seem to have learned your lesson these years, do you still want to be beaten? Muen was already immune to Tony's foul mouth, but he still asked in a deep voice. Although he was very happy about Muen's return, Tony still answered in an unconvinced manner. Tisk, you may not be my opponent now. Then, as if showing off, he pointed to several different types of Iron Man suits displayed in the display cabinet. See those iron suits? I'm Iron Man. Oh, so you've prepared your future body. By the way, what did you say you were? Battery Man, right? Moon laughed loudly, while Pepper on the side was full of surprise. It was the first time she saw someone that even Stark could not do anything to. Chapter 112. How long has it been since you last went to the farm? Tony was still very happy about Moon's return. After all, when they met, his parents were still alive. Although Moon made him very angry, the other party was an old acquaintance he had known for a long time. However, after hearing Moon's words, he couldn't help but roll his eyes. Everyone says he has a foul mouth, but facing this guy, it is hard to say who has a foul mouth. I haven't seen him for more than 10 years, why is this guy still so annoying? He can't help but want to hit him with just one mouthful. I won't argue with you about this. You disappeared for so many years, why did you suddenly come back? Tony was still somewhat curious about Moon's whereabouts. As the boss of one of the world's top technology companies, it was extremely easy for him to find someone. As long as he issued a notice, people all over the world would help him look for him. But even so, he hasn't been able to find Moon in all these years, and hasn't even heard any news about him. If Moon had not remained the same as before, he would have thought that Moon had died in some expedition. Why, I can't come back. Moon responded. Sure, you're a shareholder of Stark Industries. Glancing at Moon, Tony continued, by the way, if I remember correctly, you should be in your 50s now. How come you look younger than me? They first met in 1989, when he was only 19 and Moon was almost 30. More than 20 years have passed since then, but Moon has not changed at all, which makes him feel a little strange. Who among them is the one receiving all kinds of maintenance every day? Obviously, Moon is older than him, but now he looks much older than Moon, which makes him a little depressed. Any questions? Looking at Tony, who was soaked in sweat, Moon smiled and responded, did you choose to be a battery man because you felt you were getting old too fast? If we go by the time of his first time traveling through time and at his own age, he should be in his 70s now. But in fact, he is not that old. The total time he has spent traveling through time and space is only more than 10 years. It's just that the flow speeds in each world are different, and now that he has become an immortal void demon, age has lost its meaning to him. Seeing Moon teasing him again, Tony rolled his eyes helplessly. He really had no way to deal with Moon, his parents' personal bodyguard. After all, even if he talks badly to other people, they can't do anything to him and can only trip them up from behind. But Moon is different, this guy will just attack directly. He didn't know how many times he had been beaten before he took over Stark Industries. If Moon hadn't lived in the countryside with his parents, he would have been beaten for a longer time. It's up to you, but what are you going to do when you come back? Go back to the countryside and be a farmer again? Of course. Impossible. I came back to look for someone. I just saw the news about you, so I came to take a look. You really ruined yourself. Looking at the arc reactor on Tony's chest, Moon smiled and shook his head. Now Tony has no other way except surgery to remove the reactor from his chest. After all, that thing is hanging on his life. Seeing Moon looking at the reactor on his chest, Tony shrugged indifferently. He didn't want to do this, but if he didn't do this he would die. As for why not going for surgery? Those bullet fragments were right near his heart. If the doctor's skills were not up to par, he would really be beyond saving. According to the report from the hospital, the success rate of his surgery is very low, with the highest success rate being only 50%. He doesn't want to die on the operating table, and this kind of life is pretty good now. Besides, he has obtained the new element and doesn't have to worry about his life anymore. Forget it, looking at you like this, I guess it's useless to beat you up. Tony won't die anyway, and Howard and Maria are still alive. Neither of the couple has any intention of showing up, so why should he care about them? After finding a place to sit down, Moon picked up the blueberries Tony had placed aside and asked while eating, how is your farm and mine doing now? How should I know? That place is being taken care of by that iron arm now. How long has it been since you last went to the farm? Not long after that is, after they left, I never went back. Howard and Maria never went back after they left. I glanced at Tony. This is not long? Doesn't this mean I never went back? Seeing this guy's self-righteous look, Moon raised his eyebrows and picked up another blueberry and threw it into his mouth. What about Bucky? How's it going? Mr. Bucky is doing well, and he seems to be in love recently. Happy came over. Although Tony never contacted Bucky, he still kept in touch with Bucky, and their relationship became much closer over the years. Now, under Bucky's management, Moon and Howard's farms have been merged into an automated manner, which of course also contains various high-tech weapons. He had helped Bucky transport those weapons, all of them were powerful weapons produced by Stark Industries. Although Happy doesn't understand why Bucky would transform the farm into a military fortress, it doesn't prevent him from getting Tony's authorization to provide Bucky with equipment. Although Tony didn't care much about the situation on the farm, it was the last place his parents lived and it contained the last memories between him and his parents. However, the news from Happy shocked Muen greatly. That Yanguo who had an iron arm is now in love? And who, his sculpture, although Bucky was considered a veteran in the world of flowers in the past, this guy went through inhuman torture when he was transformed into the Winter Soldier, and his appearance changed a lot. Even if he has lived a stable life over the years, there shouldn't be any girl who would be interested in him, right? It seems like you all have a pretty good life. Even Bucky can't sit still and has started looking for a girlfriend. What about you? Looking at Tony sitting in the chair, Moon continued to ask. You're not going to have pajama parties all day like you used to, are you? After these words were spoken, Pepper, who was standing beside them, nodded silently. Although Tony had restrained himself after becoming Iron Man, he still held such a cue every now and then as a daily activity. Especially some time ago, no one knew what was wrong with Tony. Not to mention the kind of parties that she was used to, she even participated in various dangerous activities. Fortunately, Tony has come to his senses. After fighting with those out-of-control robots of Hammer Industries, Tony has now completely changed his mind. Now, she is very satisfied with Tony's state. Although she still doesn't care about anything all day, it is at least much better than before. The reason for this may be related to the warming relationship between them. After all, their relationship has become very delicate now. Chapter 113, The Weak Iron Suit. After they talked for a while, Muen suddenly stood up and looked at the iron armor in the display case. Put on your medical equipment and show me what you can do with this iron suit. As soon as these words came out, Pepper covered her mouth in surprise. That was Tony's Iron Man suit. The robots of Hammer Company were no match for Tony. How could Moon alone be Tony's opponent? Wait, what did you say? Tony was also surprised. Although he knew that Moon's fighting ability was very strong, no matter how powerful a person was, he could not be a match for his iron armor. Wear it if I tell you to. You're far from being able to hurt me. Although he had no intention of using armor, he was wearing the vibranium combat suit that Howard had made for him, and it had also been reinforced with amplitude crystals. It is absolutely impossible to hurt him unless the attack of the iron armor can destroy the vibranium. Seeing that Muen was so eager to be beaten, Tony simply fulfilled Muen's wish, as he also wanted to beat Muen up. He turned and walked onto the equipment platform specially made for equipping the iron suit. A golden red iron suit was installed on him under the control of numerous mechanical arms. Soon, the golden red Iron Man with a streamlined body appeared in front of Muen. Are you ready? I can't wait to beat you up. Oh, just relying on your disabled equipment? He sneered, and with a flash of light, an energy blade appeared out of thin air in his hand. Muen casually made a sword flower and took a light step. Almost in an instant, he came in front of Tony. Energy flickered on the energy blade, making buzzing sounds in the air, and chopped down towards the iron armor on Tony's body. Squeak with an unpleasant sound, a deep cut was made on the iron armor. If Muen had not held back, the knife would have directly cut the iron armor in half. Is this what you rely on? It's so weak. Retracting the energy blade, Muen curled his lips and gave his evaluation. The material of this iron armor is still very good. It has used the most powerful metal except vibranium. However, the energy blade in his hand has been strengthened by a large number of amplitude crystals, and its destructive power is no longer what it used to be. Facing Tony's iron armor, it can naturally cut through it easily. Tony and the others were still immersed in intense shock. What kind of knife could actually destroy Tony's iron armor? Jarvis, did you write it down just now? Yes sir, the knife in Mr. Moon's hand destroys the iron armor through the high-frequency vibrations generated by energy. Jarvis gave the answer. It had already started calculating the moment Moon's attack. According to its calculations, Moon's sword could cut off the Iron Man suit and Tony at the same time. Thump. While listening to Jarvis' report, Tony was suddenly kicked and fell heavily to the ground. The hard shell of the iron armor smashed the smooth floor into pieces. Being distracted in the middle of a battle is not an option. As he spoke, Muen rushed forward again, and the energy blade in his hand suddenly turned, and the back of the blade slashed fiercely on the iron armor. Dang! The iron armor and the energy blade collided, making a crisp sound of metal collision. Then the energy blade in Muen's hand suddenly disappeared, and was replaced by a pair of boxing gloves with fist blades. Fist gloves and hook gauntlets. This is a weapon specially made by Muen for Atlas Heaven Shaker, in order to bring out the power of Atlas Heaven Shaker. The iron hook gauntlet was also strengthened by the amplitude crystal, and it made a dull sound when Muen swung his fist. Boom boom! 2 punches hit Tony in succession, and his originally streamlined iron suit was damaged by these 2 punches. Fortunately, Tony had added an anti-impact system to his iron suit to disperse Moon's attacks, thus avoiding being seriously injured by the powerful impact hammer. Tony took a few steps back. He had seen Moon's strength and understood why he was able to protect his parents during the attack. In his opinion, Muen Qiang was like a monster, even comparable to the green-skinned giant before. It was clearly him who was wearing the iron suit, but the situation seemed to be reversed, as if Muen was the one wearing the iron suit. Snort! Taking advantage of the moment when he was being knocked back, Tony raised his hand and aimed it at Moon. His palm suddenly lit up and shot out a yellow beam of light. But the scene he expected did not happen, where Muen was knocked away by the impact of the light beam. Instead, Muen stood where he was and took the light beam. Then, Muen's fists suddenly lit up and he slammed his hands. Boom! A powerful impact burst out from Moon's boxing gloves, and the ground was directly shattered by the impact. Tony, who was wearing an iron armor, was directly hit against the wall. No, your fighting ability is too strong, isn't it? After falling from the wall, Tony slowly got up. He felt as if his waist was twisted by the impact. With one hand on his waist, Tony looked at Muen, who was smiling. How did you do it? This is unscientific. How could an ordinary person have such fighting power? No one else can master this kind of powerful force except the 2 big guys, one yellow and one green, who could destroy the city. The most important thing is that he felt that Muen's current fighting power was enough to pin the 2 big guys to the ground and beat them up. The force was so strong that it was a foul. The impact released by the collision of 2 fists actually knocked him directly against the wall. Is it because your battle suit is too weak? And your combat ability is really poor? After complaining to Tony, Moon turned around and looked at Happy and Pepper, who were standing there in a daze. Help him take off his equipment. It looks like he has sprained his leg. Hearing Muen's voice, the 2 men hurried forward. They were both shocked by Muen's strength. It was the first time they saw someone who could compete with the Iron Man. It was a one-sided crushing and Tony was beaten without any chance to fight back. However, there are still some differences between the 2. Pepper is just amazed at Moon's strength that he can actually beat Tony up. Happy was completely in awe. He thought that she was indeed his idol for nearly 20 years and was still as powerful as ever. He could already imagine how desperate the Hydra that attacked the Howards must have been to choose to attack such a powerful man. With the help of the 2 of them, Tony, who had taken off his Iron Man suit, laid down on the sofa with one hand on his waist. He felt as if his waist had been hit hard by a punch and then penetrated by a drill. Even so, he still looked at Muen, and asked while taking a breath, "You haven't answered me yet. Why are you so strong? Your fighting ability is not something that humans can achieve." In response to his question, Muen smiled and rolled up his sleeves, and then his originally strong arms gradually turned into a silver-white metallic color. "This is the combat suit I'm wearing. Howard made it using the vibranium I brought back. That metal can absorb and release energy." Chapter 114. New Mexico Fun Facts. Muen smiled and raised his eyebrows. This vibranium combat suit provided him with very good defensive capabilities. As for the impact just released, it was just returning all the pulse beams in Tony's palm. A smart person like Tony immediately reacted and understood what Muen meant after hearing the explanation given by Muen. At the beginning of the battle, Muen used the powerful power of the weapon to destroy his iron armor, and the shock waves released by Muen just now were absorbed and released from his pulse beam. Vibranium, as one of the world's top super geniuses, Tony is naturally familiar with vibranium, but the amount of vibranium circulating on the market is really small. Even if he had this idea, he couldn't wear a combat suit like Muen did. However, Muen's words also reminded him of his parents. This combat suit was made by his father. Tony quickly suppressed his sad mood, lay on the sofa, and while enjoying Pepper's massage, he asked, "When did you find the vibranium? How come I didn't know about it?" "Of course you don't know. How many times have you been to the farm? And that was the vibranium I found. Then, Mu-En changed the subject and continued, however, the remaining vibranium was used by Howard to smelt with other metals to create a vibranium alloy with slightly inferior performance. If you have been to the farm in recent years, Bucky should have told you. When Tony heard Moon's words, his expression froze instantly. The vibranium alloy was on the farm? In other words, the metal most suitable for making iron armor is on his farm? Now Tony couldn't hold it in any longer. If he had been to the farm, he would definitely know the existence of vibranium alloy. At this moment, an interesting activity suddenly started playing on the TV next to the sofa. People all over New Mexico were doing the same thing. They were competing to move a hammer. According to the first group of people who participated in the competition, they originally came here to look for meteorites, but found nothing in the crater and only saw this hammer that no one could move. They are so stupid. A hammer that no one can shake? How can, hiss. Tony, who was mocking the contestants, took a deep breath. His movement just now was too big and it affected his sprained waist. Seeing Tony's face twitching in pain, Mu-En couldn't help but laugh. Ha 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 ha, this is the result of talking foul. After saying that, he looked at the challenge on TV again. They are not stupid. Did you see that pickup truck? Have you ever seen a hammer that even a pickup truck can't pull? He already knew whose hammer it was, and Thor with a beer belly would never forget it. But that has nothing to do with him. What he really has his eyes on is the Thor's hammer and the Odin armor destroyer that will come with it. It looks quite interesting. Shall we go to New Mexico to check it out? Sure, I'm also curious, what kind of hammer is that can pull off the bed of a pickup truck? Tony readily agreed, though he once again inhaled heavily because of the large amplitude of his movements. After the massage, Pepper carefully applied medicine to Tony, which made Tony feel much more comfortable. Since they were going to New Mexico, they naturally had to arrange a private jet. Given the wealth of Stark Industries, applying for a route was nothing to Tony. Besides, the airline and the military also know how willful Tony is. Even if they don't approve the route, this guy dares to board the plane and go directly to New Mexico. But they all knew what Tony was going to do, and they had heard a little about the New Mexico game, so they were not surprised that Tony wanted to join in the fun. Therefore, by the time they boarded the plane, their route had already been approved. There were only Moon, Tony and Happy carrying a portable Iron Man suit on the plane. Pepper did not come with them. Now she is the CEO of Stark Industries and has a lot of things to do, so she has no time to accompany them to watch the fun. New Mexico. Mu-En and his companions drove towards the area where the hammer was. Along the way, they saw many vehicles heading in the same direction as them. Come to think of it, Carlson seems to be on a mission in New Mexico. Sitting in the car, Tony thought of what Carlson had said to him when he was creating the new element, that the other party was going to New Mexico to carry out a mission. Squeak! The car left a long trail of dust on the road and stopped next to a building that was being constructed, which was surrounded by barbed wire. Tony, it looks like our destination has been occupied. Happy, who was driving, looked at Tony who was sitting in the back of the car. They were still a step too late, as this place had already been occupied by the authorities. Seeing the building under construction, Tony got out of the car directly. He is not afraid of any official. If he hadn't wanted to see the hammer that no one could lift, he would not have come here from New York. Seeing Tony get out of the car, Moon and Happy also got out. Happy even took out Tony's portable iron suit directly from the trunk of the car. The three men walked towards the building, and as they approached the barbed wire, soldiers looked at them. Soon, Carlson, who looked like a good old man, hurried over. He heard someone say in his headset that Tony Stark was outside. Congratulations, Mr. Stark, your problem is solved. As he spoke, Carlson saw Moon-En beside him. He always felt that he had seen Moon-En somewhere and had a strong sense of familiarity with Moon-En. I know you. You are. Hey, how's Harry Braised Egg doing these days? Moon-En raised his eyebrows and smiled. Hearing this familiar name, Carlson immediately remembered that this was the man who drove him to chase Director Fury more than 10 years ago, the super bodyguard of the Howards. You are Mr. Moon. It seems that agents have good memories. Moon nodded with a smile and said, we should have only met once, but you can still remember me. Moon still has a good impression of this agent who has always acted as a good guy. After all, no one can dislike someone who has a gentle smile on his face all day long. I will never forget the deeds of that super bodyguard. This is not nonsense from Coulson. Now the entire shield knows that Hydra still exists, and it is Moon who caused all this. It was he who alone wiped out an entire Hydra team that was capable of fighting a small-scale war. Most importantly, he kept the Howards unharmed and brought back Bucky, the Winter Soldier, who had undergone Hydra transformation and had now become a farmer. That was a good friend of his idol, and he also had cards of the Howling Commandos in his hand. Of course, the most cards were of his favorite idol, the legend of the Howling Commandos, Captain America. Are you here to lift the hammer? As a senior agent, it was not difficult for him to guess the purpose of Muen and his men. They were coming for the hammer behind him. But he didn't care. The hammer seemed to be grown on the ground. No one could move it at all, not even Muen and the others. Chapter 115. Interested Tony. Leading a few people into the building under construction, Coulson walked in front, passing through teams of patrolling soldiers, and they finally came to the hammer. The hammer is not big and looks like anyone can lift it, but there are equipment piled up around it and no one tries to lift it. After seeing the hammer, Tony suddenly walked forward and tried to lift the hammer with his own strength. He always felt it was unscientific. How could such a small hammer be so heavy that no one or even any object could shake it? He gripped the hammer handle tightly with both hands, then slowly exerted force, trying to lift the hammer. Unfortunately, the hammer seemed to be rooted in the ground. No matter how hard he tried, it didn't move at all. What's wrong with this hammer? Happy, give me the box. Tony wanted to move the box over. He didn't believe that the hammer couldn't be lifted. He stepped on the box and pulled it hard. The box was instantly unfolded and the portable combat suit instantly covered his entire body. I just don't believe the hammer can stay still. Looking at the hammer on the ground, Tony clenched the hammer handle again, and the power system of the iron armor burst out instantly. Tony's strength in the Iron Man suit has been greatly enhanced. Even with a portable suit, he can easily push a car. In Tony's opinion, such strength should be more than enough to lift the hammer, but in fact it hit him hard in the face. The power system of the portable suit had already overheated, but the hammer still didn't respond at all, which surprised Tony. Mr. Stark, do you want to challenge me again? Coulson smiled. This was his confidence in letting Tony in. They had already confirmed that no one could lift the hammer, so letting Tony's enemies in to join in the fun would not affect them. Besides, he had just received a notice from the director, planning to keep Tony here and ask him to help S.H.I.E.L.D. study the origin of the hammer. There's something wrong with this hammer. I used more than 5 tons of force just now, but the hammer still couldn't move at all. Tony gave up. The hammer was indeed heavy and he couldn't lift it. Are you coming? Looking at Moon and Happy, Tony focused his attention on Moon. He wanted to let Moon try and see him make a fool of himself. But Muen did not follow his wish. The hammer was now cursed by Thor's father. Whoever can pick up Thor's hammer will be the real Thor. Although this is still a backdoor left by a father for his son, it is not unbreakable. As he said, whoever can pick up Thor's hammer is the real Thor. It was actually very easy for Muen to lift the hammer. He could easily do it by using the power of the void, but that was meaningless. Firstly, he didn't want to be the god of thunder of Asgard. Secondly, if he erased the spell of the king of Asgard without authorization, he would become the enemy of Asgard, which he didn't want to do. After all, Asgard still has a lot of weapons and equipment, so he might be able to get a lot of essence. It's always better to be friends than enemies. He's not a psychopath, so why would he make an enemy for no reason? You don't really think this hammer is simple, do you? Didn't Jarvis tell you about the electromagnetic waves emitted by this hammer? Of course Jarvis did. Seeing that Muen didn't take the bait, Tony shrugged a little bored, released the power of the portable suit, and looked at Thor's hammer again. This hammer is quite interesting. Mr. Stark, we want to ask you to study this hammer together, do you want to think about it? Coulson asked. Study this hammer with you guys? Tony was indeed interested, but he would not study it with people from S.H.I.E.L.D. I am indeed very interested in this hammer, but your researchers can't keep up with me. Faced with Tony's words, Coulson didn't have any good solution. He had come into contact with Tony many times and was very helpless with this willful super genius. The other party did have the intention to study the hammer, but he also heard Tony's attitude towards S.H.I.E.L.D.'s researchers, which was also Tony's consistent attitude towards other researchers. In the eyes of this super genius, few people can keep up with his thinking. Although this is true, it is also too discouraging. Then you mean? I will transfer a batch of equipment from Stark Industries, and your researchers will help me screen some new data. Tony's commanding attitude made Coulson, a good old man, frown a little, although the scientific research personnel of SHIELD could not be compared with Tony. But those people were also the best scientific researchers in their bureau. He didn't think their scientific researchers would be willing to help. But the voice of his own director came from the communicator in his ear. Meet his conditions. Since Tony is interested, he will meet Tony's conditions. Both father and son have strong R&D capabilities. Now that all of Hydra has not been found yet, Howard cannot return to Earth, so he can only ask Tony to help with the research first. Agree to Tony's terms, Coulson glanced at the researchers around him and finally nodded. Since the director has spoken, the subordinates naturally cannot disobey. They can only follow the director's orders and meet Tony's requirements. Sure, they'll help you filter the data, but when will your equipment arrive? They needed to get into research as soon as possible, and the equipment had to be delivered quickly. They will be here soon. Let me see the test data of this hammer first. He wanted to know why Thor's hammer would release such strong electromagnetic waves. Although the electromagnetic waves were confined to a range, Jarvis still detected unusually powerful electromagnetic waves. Soon, a report appeared in Tony's hands. The data on the report made Tony frown. Although it was only a preliminary data report, it could also explain many problems. For example, the electromagnetic waves of this hammer are being released at a specific frequency, and are showing a trend of accelerating. This data is quite interesting. He had never seen such strange data. The frequency of the hammer's electromagnetic waves was constantly increasing, giving people a feeling that powerful energy would be released at any time. While Tony was checking the data, Moon jumped onto a high platform nearby and came to a man holding a bow and arrow. Hawkeye Clint. This person should be considered the most special existence in the entire Avengers. Without any special abilities, he became the first-generation member of the Avengers. And the most surprising thing is that the camp he chooses will win the battle. It was as if it was the law of cause and effect. As long as he was there and participated in the action, the camp he belonged to would definitely win. Before traveling through time, he complained about this a lot. Clint seemed to be the protagonist of everyone. His appearance always brought victory, just like Hulk's big underpants. No matter how he transformed, his big underpants would remain. Chapter 116. Bad Taste. Moon looked at Clint with a smile. This man who was like the victory switch of the Avengers was actually just an ordinary man with the only amazing archery skill. Everyone else uses guns, but you use a bow and arrow. It seems that you are very confident in your archery skills. Glancing at Moon, Clint already knew Moon's identity from Coulson. He nodded and looked at the situation around him. This is my guy for dinner. Clint is very confident in his archery skills. Although he cannot guarantee that his archery skills are at the top of the world, he is at least among the top few in the world. Moreover, he has mastered a lot of combat skills. The bow in his hand is his weapon, which can be turned into a melee weapon at any time to allow him to fight the enemy. The guy who's eating. Moon smiled and shrugged. Although Clint's arrows were very accurate, he couldn't actually fight forever. The number of his arrows was the key to limiting the battle. And even though Clint has excellent fighting skills, sometimes it is impossible to win by fighting skills alone. For example, the purple potato head in the future, neither the arrows shot by Clint nor Clint's fighting skills mean anything to him. Even Captain America, the hero of equality for all, could only fight back and forth with Thanos. In the end, if his shield had not been strong enough, the tyrant's butcher knife would have killed Captain America long ago. Don't be so nervous. Muen said with a smile, raising his eyebrows and said, my career has taught me one thing, that is, to relax, so as to cope with all changes. Although you can attack at any time with an arrow on the bow, you can't just attack once, right? Although your archery skills are strong, you also need to improve your countermeasures, right? After saying that, he pointed to a huge stone not far away. He picked up a steel bar from the shelf and threw it casually. The steel bar made a sharp sound in the air and sank steadily into the boulder. See? Use everything around you to achieve your best. Moon's voice rang in his ears, and Clint's pupils quickly shrank like needles as he looked at the steel bars. Muen's casual throw just now could easily deal with airplanes and tanks, let alone attacking boulders. That kind of attack is simply not something that humans can achieve. Seeing Clint's change, Moon smiled, shook his head, turned around and jumped off the platform. He would never tell this guy that he had just released the energy stored in the vibranium combat suit by throwing steel bars. He just wanted to see the changes in Clint, and he was very satisfied with the results. Clint's doubtful look made him laugh. Returning to the others, Tony had already reached certain conclusions from the initial testing of Thor's hammer. The electromagnetic waves this hammer has are very interesting. It is a strong electric field. I guess if we can study it clearly, we can pick up the hammer. Putting down the documents in his hand, Tony turned to look at Carlson. My equipment will be delivered soon, but the inspection of the hammer will be up to your researchers. I live in a small town 40 miles to the east. I will come immediately if there is any emergency. There is nothing here, so he will not stay here. Although the environment of the town is not good, it is much better than sleeping in a tent here. After saying that, he turned around and left with Moon happy. When Moon left, he pointed out Clint, who was standing on the shelf and doubting his life, to Carlson. Seeing Moon's reminder, Carlson looked over hurriedly. Clint, who was standing on the platform, stood there as if in a trance, staring at a stone in the distance. Agent Barton, please reply. Carlson's voice rang through the communicator, which instantly brought Clint back to his senses. He spoke slowly. What's wrong, Carlson? I don't see any problem. I know it's okay. What happened to you just now? Why did you suddenly become dazed? Carlson asked. Nothing. The super bodyguard just threw out a steel bar. A steel bar, is there anything shocking about this? Could it be that the steel bar was thrown far away? These words confused Carlson. It was just a piece of steel bar. How could it be so shocking? You'll know once you come up. Seeing Clint say this, Carlson couldn't refuse. It just so happened that he also wanted to see what was going on with the steel bar that Moon had just thrown, and he actually shocked Clint so much that he stood there in a daze. Climbing onto the shelf, Carlson looked around curiously, but couldn't see the so-called steel bars anywhere. Where is it? Why can't I see it? See that boulder over there? Clint pointed out. That black hole in the rock is where the steel bars are. The black holes on the boulder are filled with steel bars? How is that possible? But if it is true, it is indeed quite shocking that the thrown steel bar actually fell into the hole. By the way, that hole was made by steel bars. Now Carlson was even more speechless. What Clint said was becoming more and more magical. Such a big rock would be difficult to penetrate even with a drill. How could it be possible to be penetrated by a casually thrown steel bar? But based on his understanding of Clint, this guy usually wouldn't make such jokes during a mission. Could it be true? Looking at the huge rock in the distance, Carlson prepared to find someone to open the stone and take a look. If it was really as Clint said, then the problem would be serious. After a long time, with the help of a group of engineers, the huge rock was broken into pieces, revealing the situation inside. A steel bar was embedded in the rock. Chief, I'm Agent Carlson. We have to raise Mr. Moon's safety assessment. The steel bar he threw just now was completely embedded in a boulder. Hearing Carlson's report, Fury, who was on the aerospace carrier, frowned. As one of the people who had worked with Moon before, he knew Moon's fighting ability better than Carlson did. This situation was nothing to Moon. What really made him frown was that Moon actually showed his strength. Although not many people knew about it, it was still a troublesome matter. I understand. Don't worry about his affairs. I will make my own arrangements. Fury said in a serious tone that now was not the time to focus on Moon's power. What they really needed to pay attention to was that strange hammer. That hammer was most likely an alien weapon. Although he had learned about many alien weapons with the help of the Skrulls, this was the first time he had seen an alien weapon that looked like a hammer. As for the hammer-shaped satellite mentioned by the locals, it is just an official statement. A strange hammer appeared, and that guy suddenly came back. I don't know what the future will be like, but... Fury narrowed his eyes slightly and glanced at all the people working around him. He has not yet found out who Hydra is. After the 2 attacks Howard suffered, there have been fewer and fewer traces of Hydra's activities. Over the years, he has been tracking down Hydra, but Howard has always said that Moon believes that S.H.I.E.L.D. is where Hydra is most concentrated. Chapter 117. Abnormal Hammer. He had considered this suspicion carefully, but in the end he found that this might indeed be the case. The most dangerous place in the world is also the safest place. Hydra, whose surface has been eroded, can easily integrate into SHIELD by changing its face. They work for SHIELD and are growing stronger by parasitizing SHIELD. Now they are too powerful to be eliminated, and he cannot tell which one is the real Hydra. Hopefully I don't see you guys on Hydra's list. Compared to Fury's suspicion, Mu-En was living a very happy life. Although the entertainment activities in the town are monotonous, some food is good, especially his favorite barbecue. Animal fat emits a fragrant aroma when roasted at high temperature, and after being sprinkled with seasonings, the aroma blends together under the roasting flames, becoming more intense and making people salivate. Ha, this tastes really good. Mu-En laughed. Haha, you're the only one who can use top quality steak to make barbecue. Tony laughed and opened his mouth to bite the piece of beef that Mu-En had grilled. He was very satisfied with Mu-En's cooking skills. The taste was better than the Turkish kebab he often ate. However, every time he thought about the fact that this barbecue was made with several different top-quality steaks, he felt helpless. Although those steaks were not expensive, it always felt a bit of a waste to use them for barbecue every time. Take another bite of the sirloin steak cut into small pieces. The meat and fat are completely integrated under Mu-En's processing. The fresh and fragrant taste instantly spreads throughout the mouth, and the meat tendons are even more delicious, leaving people with an unforgettable aftertaste. Of course, sirloin steak is just one of Mu-En's barbecue ingredients. All kinds of top-quality steaks can become delicious barbecue. What Mu-En and his friends like most is the Kobe beef with denser fat. The fat of the beef is spread all over the meat, and it feels like it will melt instantly in the mouth. The taste is intoxicating. Sure enough, steaks with more fat will taste better when grilled. Tony swallowed the barbecue in his mouth and couldn't help but let out a sigh. He was completely intoxicated by the deliciousness of the barbecue. Of course, while enjoying themselves, they did not forget to deal with their business. The detection data of Thor's hammer is always sent to Tony's mobile device in real time, allowing him to grasp all the data at all times. That evening, Tony, who was checking data as usual, suddenly discovered that there was an abnormality in the electromagnetic waves of Thor's hammer, and they could also see dark clouds in the direction of Thor's hammer from outside. That weather has something to do with the hammer. Happy, let's go. The three of them got in the car and headed towards Thor's hammer. Tony wanted to see what was happening with the hammer, while Moon looked at the dark cloud with interest. The appearance of dark clouds meant that Thor had arrived, and he was getting closer and closer to Thor's hammer. However, Thor failed to understand Odin's thoughts, so his efforts were in vain. Soon they arrived, and the place was already covered by even thicker dark clouds, giving people an extremely depressing feeling. The hammer finally moved. Tony ran in excitedly. He had to see for himself what had happened to the hammer. At this time, Thor's hammer released a wide range of electromagnetic waves, and all the surrounding instruments and equipment were severely interfered with. The displayed images were all various mosaic images. After seeing Thor's hammer, Tony was completely dumbfounded. He thought that since the hammer had undergone such a big change, there must be some different changes. But now, the hammer still fell alone in the same place. If the surrounding equipment had not been disturbed by the strong electromagnetic waves, he would have thought that nothing had happened. Has this hammer never undergone any changes? Tony looked at the researchers around him who were testing the hammer. They all shook their heads. They felt the same way as Tony. Such strong electromagnetic waves did not cause any changes to the hammer. It seemed that the electromagnetic waves had nothing to do with the hammer. How can it be? Tony fell into deep thought, while Moon went up to the viaduct again and chatted with Clint. Then you cleaned the stone? Isn't the inside of the stone interesting? He knew how fast the steel bar he threw was. If the steel bar penetrated into the stone at that speed, the inside of the stone would definitely change. That's right. Clint looked at the broken stone. The steel bar is almost embedded in the stone. How did you do it? This question kept lingering in his mind. How could humans use their own strength to throw steel bars of that power without mutating? If it was Hulk who threw the steel bar, he could still accept it. After all, that big guy was incredibly strong. But Mu-En looks like a normal human being. How could he project that kind of strength? Haha, this is a secret, but if you ask that boiled egg in your bureau, he might be able to tell you the answer. The boiled eggs of SHIELD? A figure appeared in Clint's mind, their SHIELD director Nick Fury. Could it be that Mu-En and the director know each other, or have some connection. Clint kept the news in mind, and after this mission was over, he planned to ask the director. As they were chatting, a light drizzle suddenly fell from the dark clouds in the sky, and a strong figure was running towards the temporary experimental area. "Look, isn't that guy interesting?" Muen said with a smile, and Hawkeye spotted the figure at the first moment, and the bow in his hand was instantly drawn. Muen knew very well who that figure was. The rain falling from the sky was the best proof. That figure was the future Thor, the fat-bellied otaku. As Thor got closer to Thor's hammer, dark clouds in the sky began to fill with thunder and roars. The rainfall is getting heavier and heavier. In the arid state of New Mexico, this amount of rain seems very strange no matter how you look at it. "Haha, I'll go take a look." As soon as he finished speaking, Muen jumped up from the overpass and rushed towards Thor's hammer. Under Clint's surprised gaze, Moon landed steadily next to the only part of Thor's hammer that was not obscured by the building. At this moment, Thor was like a wild Viking pirate. Relying on his strong body, he broke through the blockade of a large number of security personnel. Seeing how powerful Thor was, Coulson became curious. Could it be that this strong man knew the origin of the hammer? "Let him in." He glanced at Muen next to Thor's hammer and said, "Someone is here to deal with him." After the destruction of the boulder embedded with steel bars and the director's slightly vague words, he had realized that Muen possessed inhuman power. Besides, he could see that Muen was very interested in that man, and he would definitely take action. Faced with such inhumanly powerful force, no matter how powerful this strong man is, he cannot defeat Muen. As for Thor, he was rushing towards his hammer with excitement. As long as he picked up the hammer again, he could become a god again and return to Asgard. Chapter 118. Thor and Loki. As soon as he arrived next to Thor's hammer, Thor saw Moon standing by. Muen looked at Thor with a smile, pointed at the Thor's hammer beside him and said with a smile, "It seems that you really want this hammer." Although he did not stop the other party's idea, he wanted to test the combat power of this Asgard's god of thunder after he lost his divine power and became immortal. He raised his hand and hooked it, looking at Thor with a smile. "Come and show me your strength." Hearing Muen's words, Thor rushed towards Muen without any hesitation. As long as he rushed over, he could get his hammer back and become the god of thunder of Asgard again. However, imagination is beautiful, but reality is cruel. After becoming immortal, Thor only has a strong body, and his fighting skills are no match for Moon. Especially now his mind was full of Thor's hammer, and his heart was not on the battle at all. The moment he rushed towards Muen, he was kicked away. "Oh, I thought you were so great, but now it seems that you are not that great." Coulson, who was standing under the awning to avoid the rain, nodded repeatedly. This burly man was too reckless and did not look like someone who knew the origin of the hammer. Thor climbed up from the ground, his whole body covered in mud. As if to cheer himself up, he roared and rushed towards Muen. He already understood that if he couldn't defeat the human in front of him, he would never be able to get Mjolnir. Although his style of doing things has always been rather reckless, this does not mean that Thor is stupid. On the contrary, as the heir to Asgard, he is actually very smart. After feeling Muen's strength, he decided to have a good fight with the man in front of him and teach this guy a severe lesson. Seeing Thor's punch coming, Muen suddenly stepped back and turned sideways to avoid Thor's attack. "I don't like getting covered in mud." As soon as he finished speaking, he kicked Thor again, kicking him out again. Seeing him slowly getting up in the mud, his face gasping for breath due to pain, it turned out that the man in front of him was much stronger than those soldiers just now, but he couldn't even touch him. And Muen also roughly understood Thor's fighting skills. As a god in the Vikings' Norse mythology, Thor, like the Vikings, used bold and aggressive moves in battle. When facing ordinary earthlings, Thor's bold and aggressive moves can give him an advantage in battle. But this does not mean that Thor can fight against many enemies alone like he did when he was a god. After all, he is just a mortal now. Well, a strong ordinary person is not as threatening to others as a pistol. "You are really weak." Hearing Muen's comment, Thor let out a roar and rushed towards Muen. Thunder suddenly roared in the dark clouds in the sky, and Thor's hammer seemed to be echoing the thoughts of its owner. Seeing Thor rushing up again, Moon lost interest and hid aside, revealing Thor's hammer behind him. He had no interest in Thor in his mortal form now, but it was still fun to see the guy get rejected by Mjolnir. Seeing Muen making way, Thor calmed down again. Since the other party had no intention of stopping him, the mockery of him just now could be written off. Coming in front of Thor's hammer, Thor's face was filled with joy. He was about to regain his divine power and become the god of thunder who could call the wind and rain in the past. Mjolnir, I'm back. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand to grasp the handle of Thor's hammer. The strong muscles on his arm swelled instantly, and it seemed that he had used all his strength. Boom! The moment Thor grasped the handle of the hammer, lightning and thunder flashed in the sky. Tony, who had just repaired the testing equipment nearby, saw a flash on the monitor as soon as he started the testing equipment, and large blocks of pictures appeared. "Sir, I just found a large magnetic wave." Jarvis' voice sounded in Tony's headphones, but due to the strong interference of electromagnetic waves, the received signal was intermittent. A strong electromagnetic wave over a large area. Looking at Thor, who was trying hard to lift Thor's hammer, Tony knew very well that the strong electromagnetic wave was caused by this strong man. Is there any connection between this bodybuilding coach and the hammer? However, Thor obviously disappointed everyone except Moon. Although he caused lightning and thunder the moment he touched the hammer, like all of them, he could not move the hammer at all. How is it possible? Father! Seeing that he could not regain his divine power, Thor roared at the sky. He didn't expect that his father Odinson would actually exile him to Midgard and become immortal. "Ha, it looks like this hammer isn't familiar to you." Looking at Thor kneeling on the ground, Mjolnir laughed. From full of joy to great disappointment, Thor experienced great ups and downs in this instant. Faced with Moon's ridicule, Thor did not react at all. He just knelt on the ground stupidly and let Coulson's men lift him up. As Thor was carried away, the thunder in the sky gradually subsided and the dark clouds slowly dissipated. "Coulson, I have some questions for him." Tony yelled to Coulson as he fixed the equipment. The vision just now has confirmed that the hammer is related to Thor, but he has to ask what the specific relationship is before he can know. Coulson did not refuse Tony's request. After all, Tony was in charge of the research on the hammer, and he also saw the situation just now. From emitting electromagnetic waves to attracting dark clouds and lightning, what are the origins of this hammer and this man? Are they aliens? He had seen an alien before, an ugly green-skinned creature that had turned into him, and he still remembered it vividly. Thor was taken to an independent temporary prison and now he has to report the matter to the director. Shortly after Coulson took Thor away, Moon saw a thin man in a robe appear next to Thor's hammer. Considering the fact that the people around him turned a blind eye, Mjolnir immediately understood that this person was Thor's younger brother, the #1 wizard in the 9 realms, the scheming god Loki who liked to stab people in the kidneys. The people around him were not turning a blind eye, but they simply could not see him. As the #1 wizard in the 9 realms, Loki's magical attainments were still very good, and he could still do a simple cognitive shielding. Looking at this ultimate problem child with great interest, Loki can be considered a key figure in starting the Avengers. The first wizard of the 9 realms, who had been fooled by Odin since childhood, had always dreamed of becoming a king, but a series of actions by Odin made him lose the qualification to become a king. After all, Odin said that whoever is recognized by Mjolnir is the king of Asgard. After saying that, he turned around and handed Mjolnir to his brother Thor. Although Thor is Odin's biological son, to Loki who is completely unaware of this, such differential treatment is tantamount to a denial of Loki. Chapter 119, The Dejected Savage. Loki reached out and grasped the handle of the hammer, trying to lift Thor's hammer. But just like in the past, Mjolnir did not move at all in his hands, which made Loki somewhat disappointed. Even though Thor has lost his divine power now, he still cannot gain the recognition of Mjolnir. However, Loki was not too upset. Now that Thor had lost his divine power and was no longer qualified to inherit the throne of Asgard, he let the hammer accompany Thor and stay in the atrium. Loki let go of the hammer handle and turned around to see Mjolnir leaning against the wall and looking at him, but he did not think that Mjolnir was looking at him. He was still very confident in his magic, and his title of the #1 magician in the 9 realms was not earned for nothing. He walked past Mjolnir with a calm expression and headed towards the room where Thor was being held. After he left, Moon smiled and touched his chin. He knew what Loki was going to do and he just hoped that Thor would not be hit by his brother's words. After looking at Mjolnir who was standing there, Mjolnir smiled and turned away. He would extract the essence of I from Thor's hammer, but not now. If he remembered correctly, when Loki came down, the king of Asgard was about to enter Odin's sleep. God knows what that old guy does when he sleeps. If we try to extract it now, it might alarm the old man. Loki is here too. It looks like it won't be long before the first generation of the Avengers will be assembled. Thinking silently in his heart, Muen walked outside. As soon as I walked out of this temporary experimental base, I saw two anxious-looking people rushing over. I want to see your commander. The leading Professor Shavig said to the guards guarding the door that he had received a notification from Jane and knew that Thor had broken into the laboratory built by Shield. Although he thought Thor was a reckless and hot-blooded guy, Jane obviously liked him, and they also needed manpower to help move the experimental equipment, so he prepared to bail Thor out from S.H.I.E.L.D. Are you here to rescue that Viking pirate? Muen walked out. He could roughly guess who these two people were. One is Thor's girlfriend Jane on Earth, and the old scholar in the lead is Professor Shavig who helped Loki open the portal. Yes. Shavig was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, I have a student who has been a little mentally disturbed recently. He made a bet with someone in the bar, saying that he could bring back the hammer satellite. He doesn't drink very well. He doesn't look like he's drunk. Muen laughed. Soon, at the notice of the guard, Coulson walked out of the temporary experimental base. When he saw Professor Shavig and others, he was a little surprised. He still had some information about these two people. When he first arrived in New Mexico, he knew about Professor Shavig, an astronomer who was conducting scientific experiments here, and his student Jane. At first, he even considered confiscating Professor Shavig's and his students' instruments, equipment, and various materials. But after Tony decided to join the experiment, he knew that the information would be useless, so he did not carry out his plan. Unexpectedly, instead of me going to look for them, they came to me. Professor Shavig, what can I do for you? Seeing that the other party knew him, Professor Shavig became more confident. He had some connections with S.H.I.E.L.D. in private. I'm here to bail someone out. He was a little drunk and ran here. He should have been caught by you now. Oh, you mean the big guy? He is really very strong. Coulson nodded with a smile. You guys wait here first, the big guy will come out soon. As soon as he finished speaking, Coulson turned around and walked into the experimental base. The information about Thor had already been investigated. The other party was indeed a scientist, but at the bottom of the information, the assessment of a fake identity was very eye-catching. Obviously, this identity was fabricated, but this did not affect Saul's release on bail by Shavig. They had already collected Saul's body samples, and Tony had ended the unpleasant exchange with Saul. Now letting Saul go would not affect their work. Let that big guy go. After receiving Coulson's order, all the shackles on Thor were removed, but Thor, who regained his freedom, looked distraught. He met his younger brother Loki, from whom he learned the news of his father's death, and he was also exiled forever. Now he understood that this was his father's punishment for him, because his recklessness killed his father and he was not worthy of returning to Asgard. When Thor was sent out, Tony also walked out. The situation here had returned to normal. He had to go back to look at the detected data and the news he got from Thor. Stark? Seeing Tony coming out, Shavig and Jane, who were waiting for Thor, shouted in surprise. They didn't expect that the playboy of Stark Industries, the famous Iron Man Tony Stark, was also here. Who are you? You seem familiar. Looking at Professor Shavig carefully, Tony quickly remembered who the man in front of him was. Professor Shavig. Although Tony was very proud, he still knew some outstanding scientists, such as the astronomer in front of him. Are you here to fish that guy out? Thinking of Thor, Tony became very unhappy. He felt that guy was a lunatic and didn't know what nonsense he was talking about. What Asgard, what Thor, and what Rainbow Bridge? Those are things in mythology, and they actually used these things to fool him. The most ridiculous thing is that Loki is Thor's younger brother. Do you really think he has never read Norse mythology? Loki is obviously Thor's uncle, so how can he be Thor's brother? They can't even make up stories. After looking at Thor who was being escorted out by the soldiers behind him, Tony turned and walked towards the car. He felt there was no need to communicate with this mentally ill guy. A few days later, several uninvited guests came to Tony's temporary laboratory. They were Professor Shavig and his colleagues. They came to solicit sponsorship. As scientists studying astronomy, most of what they study are things like meteors and meteorites, which don't attract as much investment as other research. Mr. Stark, you know the research prospects of astronomy. Our future technological development is the universe, so So you're here to ask me for investment? Tony flipped through the information handed over by Professor Shavig. As one of the top scholars in the field of astronomy, Professor Shavig's research would naturally not be bad. He saw something interesting in Professor Shavig's materials. How do you know that the Einstein-Rosen bridge really exists? It's just a theory. Do you have a way to realize this theory? The Einstein-Rosen bridge is a hypothesis made by Einstein and Nathan Rosen when they were studying the gravitational field equations. They believed that it was possible to move through space and even time through impulse. Chapter 120. Tony's reasoning. But that was just a hypothesis. How come it became true for Professor Shavig? The rainbow, Einstein-Rosen bridge is indeed possible, and we can use energy to open the channel to accomplish this, Thor explained. Asgard's rainbow bridge works on this principle, using powerful energy to open a channel, thereby achieving rapid movement in space. After hearing Thor's answer, Tony threw the information on the table and lay on the sofa looking at Thor. In theory, it is possible, but how much energy is needed and in what form should the energy be output? Can you answer these questions? It's easy to say that we can use energy to open a channel, but if we want to jump through space, it's not something that can be solved with just a few words. Thor did not answer Tony's question. The manufacturing process of the Rainbow Bridge was very complicated, and it could not be easily completed even in Asgard. Seeing that Thor shut up and stopped talking, Tony looked at Professor Shavig again. Although the theories and the data are difficult to implement, I still decided to fund you. I hope you can complete the research in the data. These theories are indeed good. Once the research on the data is completed, humans can then turn their attention to the universe. As the boss of Stark Industries, he would certainly not miss this opportunity to make money. Seeing that Tony decided to fund them to complete their astronomical research, Professor Shavig excitedly clenched his fist to cheer them on. Now they no longer have to make various research equipment by themselves as they did in the past. And perhaps all this really has to be attributed to Thor. After all, the theories and their materials are all definite answers obtained from Thor. Just as they were cheering, Happy came in carrying a large piece of beef. There are a few people dressed in medieval costumes in town. They look like Viking pirates. Is there a masquerade party recently? The outfits of those people were really retro, especially the fat guy, who looked like a Nordic Viking pirate. These words stunned Thor and others. They had already accepted Thor's words and knew that Thor was the god of thunder from Asgard. And this is exactly what is recorded in Norse mythology, and the most widely circulated Norse mythology is about the barbaric Vikings from Northern Europe. Thor seemed to have thought of something and rushed outside, leaving Happy with a confused look on his face. What's going on with this guy? After putting the steak in the refrigerator in the kitchen, Happy sat on the sofa and looked at Muen beside him. Why are you interested in children's books like Norse mythology lately? Recently, Muen has been holding a book on Norse mythology all day long, and he even laughs when he sees some interesting parts. Of course it's because of our god of thunder, Thor. Glancing at the curious Happy, Muen smiled and waved the hand with the Mjolnir pattern printed on it. Does the pattern on this design look like the one on that hammer? Really? These patterns are really similar. Happy looked at the hammer pattern in the book. Although the pattern didn't look much like the hammer, the pattern on it did look similar to the hammer. This caught Tony's attention, and he walked over and picked up the Norse mythology in Muen's hand. The hammer pattern on the page is indeed the same as the hammer that Coulson is guarding, especially the clover-like symbol in the center, which is even more eye-catching. Strong electromagnetic field, can attract lightning, too heavy to lift, can't this really be God's weapon? Tony muttered to himself, and suddenly he clapped his hands as if he thought of something. By the way, that guy's called Thor. Now everything connected, the god of thunder Thor in Norse mythology and his hammer Mjolnir. I get it. The so-called gods are actually aliens that are similar to humans. Tony felt that he had figured out the whole thing. Thor was just an alien with powerful weapons. The hammer is actually not that heavy. It must be some kind of alien technology that uses the strong electromagnetic field that is constantly emitted to keep the hammer firmly attached to the ground. As Thor is the holder of the hammer, he naturally has the authority to use it, so when Thor approaches, the sky becomes overcast with dark clouds, lightning, and thunder. It's just that there might be something wrong with the hammer now, so Thor couldn't pick it up. I have to say, what Tony thought was almost exactly the same as the actual situation. But the only thing that is wrong is that Thor is indeed a god, and his life level is far beyond that of ordinary people. Whether it is lifespan or physical fitness, they are far superior to humans. Unless he uses some special weapons to attack, Thor, who has regained his divine power, can still be a powerful Superman here even without using Thor's hammer. No wonder that guy said the Einstein-Rosen bridge is real. It seems my investment was right. Reasoning based on the current situation, what Thor said should be true. The rainbow bridge that can connect the 9 realms is an Einstein-Rosen bridge opened up using energy. Thinking of this, Tony looked at Professor Shavig and others. I will increase my investment in your research. As long as the Viking pirate is telling the truth, there will be absolutely no problems with this research. After getting Tony's assurance again, Professor Shavig and his colleagues felt like they were dreaming. They got the sponsorship so easily, and from what Tony said, he would continue to invest in their research. This made them overjoyed, because not long ago, if they wanted to conduct research, they had to drive a broken car to find a place to conduct astronomical observations. While they were ecstatic, Thor walked in with 4 people dressed in antiques. Let me introduce them to you. They are my best friends. Before he could finish his words, he was interrupted by Muen. Let me guess. He stood up from the sofa and looked at the 4 people. Lady Sif and the 3 warriors of Asgard, right? Muen's words made Thor stunned. He had only told Shavig and the others about his identity, so how could Muen know it? Does it feel a bit strange, Thor? Moon picked up the Norse mythology and said with a smile, Tony has already guessed your identity, and I am no exception. Seeing that Muen said so, Thor no longer concealed his feelings and nodded immediately. He didn't care about his identity being exposed. He always said that he was from Asgard, but other people just didn't believe him. Yes, they are from Asgard, and so am I. I am Thor, the god of thunder in this myth book. A fool who almost caused a war between the 2 worlds due to his reckless behavior and even killed his own father. He remembered what Loki had said, that his father was dead, and now he had given up the idea of returning to Asgard. Even if Asgard revoked his exile, he would exile himself in Midgard. Wait, who said His Majesty is dead? His Majesty has only entered Odin's sleep. The acting king of Asgard is Loki now. Fandral, the most elegant of the 3 warriors of Asgard, asked, where did Thor hear this rumor from?